subscribe, like the video, and, if possible, join Patreon. But if you don't have much money, you can support the channel by watching the novels on euroaudiobooks.com. Remember that you can participate in the polls so that your favorite novel gets published for free.
3 white bone claws extending from the ends of his fists. He said that if you are willing to come back, he will apply for the position of 5-star general for you. Joseph said this and looked at Kyle seriously. Only after fighting can we trust each other's backs, Kyle said to himself, thinking back to the battle with Steve at the base. Inside the circle, a weathered middle-aged man in leather jacket and jeans was facing off against a cute girl in a hood and holding a sword. Sodium carbon steel. Logan looked at Murasame with a little fear. Through Kyle's daily popularization of knowledge, he knew that cold weapons made of this material were specifically designed to counter the self-healing factor. These are the family code names of Logan and Yutong, respectively. They're usually addressed like this when outsiders are around. Luo Jin is warlike by nature, and Yutong is stingy and arrogant. He could foresee that these two would fight sooner or later, but he never thought it would happen so soon. However, even though he was wary, he had a lot of experience in combat, and there was no reason for him to give up the initiative in the battle. From a third-person perspective, this is an extremely strange and supernatural scene. Logan, with wolf-like claws, is tightly entangled with a risen knife that moves out of thin air. Let's go and take a look. Kyle waved his hand and led the 3 of them to the backyard of the manor. In the backyard of the manor, on the open lawn, the 3 guests nodded in agreement, and Kyle, as the host, led them into the main entrance of the manor building. Murasame stopped Logan's steps and continued to slash with his claws, making a series of crisp sounds. Anyway, I'm just delivering a message, and I have no intention of pleading for Admiral Chester, Joseph said bluntly. Kyle rejected it calmly, not at all obsessed with the so-called 5-star general position. Forget it, I can't even handle the duties of a major general, let alone a 5-star general. I'll just have to trouble Fury when the time comes. Master. The 2 maids in the hall on the first floor saw Kyle return and hurriedly bowed their heads to greet him. One of the girls approached with a hurried look on her face and announced, Wolf King and Chi Tong are competing in the backyard. Joseph, who was a major, shrugged and said with a wry smile, This is all because of your reputation as a symbol of peace. You may not know that General Chester resigned from his position as a 5-star general, but before that, he promoted the ranks of all the officers who had fought with you. Chapter 121 Shield established. You must attack the person who is being controlled by your mind. Logan took full advantage and swung his claws hard, ignoring the pain. He knocked Murasame back several meters, then accelerated and sprinted to close the distance between him and Yutong. Yutong raised her eyes, and Murasame, who was controlled by her mind, reduced her power trend and could not catch up with Logan's speed at full speed. I want, Logan whispered, rushing to within 1 meter of Yutong. He briefly gathered strength in his arms, arched them, and stabbed forward with his bone claws. Seeing that his sharp claws were about to fall, Yutong's eyes suddenly glowed with silver light, and she stretched her hands slightly to both sides. The boss said that we should always have a backup plan. Bang! The powerful psychokinesis caused an air explosion that spread out from Yutong's body. Logan widened his eyes and found that the bone claws were stagnant and could not advance even half an inch. The invisible air barrier bounced back, and he fell backwards to the ground. Is this a psychokinesis barrier that is strong enough to withstand the aftermath of a nuclear explosion? This is too. Logan didn't have time to think, as Murasame behind him intensified his attack again. The cold and gleaming swords forced him to roll over and dodge in a slightly awkward manner. The grass on the ground was left bare under the sword blows, as if it had been run over by a lawnmower. So the strongest here is not the Wolf King, but Red Eye. The surrounding children booed, and their eyes changed slightly when they saw Logan was at a disadvantage. Logan realized that the situation was not good. He did a beautiful backflip and stood up. He took back his bone claws and grabbed the Murasame, who was swinging rapidly with his bare hands. He held the hilt of the sword with one hand and grasped the sharp blade with the other hand without protection. The Murasame, which was blessed by his mind, vibrated and hummed, and the invisible psychokinesis pulled and tried to pull out of it. I got you. Logan calmed down and used brute force to firmly restrain Murasame. Yutong frowned and tried her best to use her mind, but she was unable to take back control of Murasame. The duel between the two began to turn into a pure tug-of-war between strength and psychokinesis. Logan dragged the violently trembling Murasame with both hands and walked closer step by step, not caring about the blood flowing out of his cut palms. Yutong raised her little face unyieldingly, the silver light in her pupils faintly turning red, and her black hair swayed slightly as she was on the verge of losing control of her mind. Just as the distance between the two men was less than 2 meters, and the children watching on the field were holding their breath in extreme tension, a strong and steady voice suddenly came from outside the grass. "Stop, that's it." As soon as he finished speaking, Kyle had already joined the battle, walking between the two of them at a very fast speed, holding Yutong with one hand and putting the other hand on Logan's shoulder. Logan panted and let go of the risen sword in his hand, then lay back on the ground exhausted. Yutong, on the other hand, was mentally exhausted, and her body limply fell, then was hugged by Lucy, who ran over. Kyle looked at Yutong in Lucy's arms and verbally taught her, "I gave you Murasame to increase the strength of your mind-controlled attacks, not to limit the diversity of your mind-controlled attacks. Murasame was restricted just now. You can just give up Murasame and control any other objects around to launch a secondary attack." As for you, Logan, Kyle pondered and said to Logan, who was lying on the ground, "Thought control can just restrain us. The body of the evolved and the material of sodium carbon steel can just restrain the self-healing ability, but you can still use your Superman physique and skills to crush him early, and even use your speed to make the opponent's judgment and reaction unable to keep up with you." This battle looked like a fight between gods, but in reality it was too clumsy and rigid without fully utilizing the highlights of their abilities. However, after this battle, Kyle also learned about the two people's ability flaws and compensation plans. Although Yutong's mind ability is strong, her body is still too fragile. She can be paired with the Super Agent ability card to strengthen her physique while extending her already pitifully short lifespan. In a one-on-one duel, if Logan doesn't meet someone like Yutong, he can definitely exert 200% of his combat power in a pure melee duel. Currently, there is no card suitable for him. If there is enough adamantium metal, his body can be taken to a whole new level. Wolverine. Kyle pondered to himself. Under his gaze, Logan's hair stood on end as if he had a premonition. He quickly got up from the ground, covering his injured left palm, and said he would get it bandaged. "All right, go back and have a rest first. I still have guests to entertain." Kyle reminded. The people in the manor then noticed that there were 3 outsiders watching outside the lawn in the backyard. But perhaps it was because they had witnessed the inhuman battle just now, which subverted their imagination and gave them some kind of stimulation. And now they are still standing there in a trance. Interior building of the manor, reception hall on the 2nd floor. "Kyle, I thought you were the only Superman in the world, but I didn't expect there were 2 more here." Joseph sighed. Fury agreed. "Yeah, I've seen Logan before in Germany, but I didn't expect him to be so strong. He can use beast-like bone claws from both hands to fight." Howard smiled in a gentlemanly manner. He was the calmest of the 3. Having seen Kyle's various abilities, he was no longer surprised. "Kyle, why don't we let Logan or that little girl help me?" Fury spoke impatiently. "What? Has the department that the president mentioned last time, whose purpose is to target the remnants of Hydra lurking around the world, been established?" Kyle asked with some interest. "The United Nations Council has approved the application, but the specific regulations and projects have not yet been finalized, and the name of the department is still tentative. I came here to hear your opinion. After all, this department was originally established because of you." Fury asked Kyle, "What do you think of the name Excalibur Bureau?" "God, Excalibur Bureau?" Kyle, who was sitting cross-legged on the sofa, was stunned. It took him a while to recover from the name. He hesitated and said, "Would it be better to call it Shield?" Fury and Howard were slightly stunned, both seeming to be sadly remembering a man in a tights with a shield on his back. Fury agreed and said, "All right, let's call it SHIELD, which stands for Strategic Homeland Defense Attack and Logistics Agency. This newly established shield is not just for show. The president asked our military to fully cooperate with this mysterious department. It also gave the green light to some cumbersome political procedures. Joseph sighed. After all, you are the symbol of peace. Fury looked at Kyle confidently and said in a deep voice, "You are the designated director now. If you are here, I believe S.H.I.E.L.D. will become the strongest shield for world peace." Kyle shook his head and said, "No one is more suitable than you to be the first director of S.H.I.E.L.D. Then you should have a real job, right?" Fury was still not giving up and said with his hands spread out, "Without you, S.H.I.E.L.D's strongest backing would be gone. To curry favor with someone, this is his main purpose." Kyle thought for a moment and asked Howard, "Do you have a real job at S.H.I.E.L.D.?" Howard nodded and said, "They wanted to hire me as the director of science and technology for that department, but Stark Industries was too busy, so I only agreed to serve as a scientific advisor for the strategic department in the future." Kyle calmly took a sip of red wine and said with a smile, "Then I will be the strategic chief consultant of S.H.I.E.L.D. in the future." Chapter 122, Granting Ability, S.H.I.E.L.D. General Strategic Consultant. When the people in the reception room on the second floor heard this, they were stunned and had strange expressions on their faces. The peace symbol of top combat power, serving as the department's chief consultant? This is even more outrageous than Logan being a nanny. Most importantly, even Fury didn't know there was such a position in the newly established S.H.I.E.L.D. "Didn't you ask me to put my name on the list?" The position of Chief Strategic Consultant is not bad. If there are any major decisions in the department, I can participate in the discussion when I am free," Kyle said with certainty, having his own thoughts and ideas in mind. S.H.I.E.L.D., a mysterious high-end organization on Marvel Earth that deals with supernatural phenomena and maintains world peace. Trying to fight against alien invasions or even evil gods with ordinary agents and weapons is doomed to a thankless and miserable position. And in essence, it was originally founded by the remnants of the Hydra organization. As the largest hideout lurking in the world, the daily annihilation operations against Hydra can be regarded as a classic case of the thief crying "Stop thief." It was not until the 21st century that Nick Fury, as the successor director of S.H.I.E.L.D., formed the first superhero force in history, the Avengers, which truly demonstrated its value. Kyle has no intention of stepping into the muddy water of S.H.I.E.L.D. Even though the new department has a clean foundation now, it has a large number of people and a long history, and it is inevitable that it will be lurking and infected by the Hydra organization in the future. This was also the original intention of why he founded the Carl family. Only when the power is completely in his own hands can it be considered a real card and foundation. It's up to you. You can have a title in S.H.I.E.L.D. Even if it's just an honorary position, it's better than any resources provided by the president. Fury said helplessly with a slight headache. Cannot assign any more ability cards to this organism. Okay, there's no need to snoop into their thoughts from now on. They are all friends who can be trusted. Kyle shook his head. He did not actively ask Yutong to do these things, but Yutong still secretly insisted on doing this. Yutong lay unconscious on the pillow. The super agent's ability card was equivalent to skipping the steps of reagent preparation and injection, physical exercise and recovery, and strengthening the body through rapid genetic modification. Why attack anyone else when you can? Why target Kyle, the killer demon? Where's his brain? Sometimes, people's hearts are complicated and changeable. If you keep trying to pry into other people's minds, it will be difficult to make real friends. Kyle advised Yutong. Let me say this in advance. If in the future I find out that S.H.I.E.L.D. is using a false name to do evil things like Hydra, since I can help it to be established, I can also defeat and abolish it. Kyle said it calmly, but the domineering and indifference in his words made the reception room solemn. Super Agent, as the inferior version of Kyle's super soldier ability, also brings about comprehensive physical development, including strength, speed, physical fitness, resistance to impact, as well as significant changes in metabolism and human aging. Remember what I said when I took you out of the underground laboratory. Longevity and strength. This is what you deserve. Kyle held the card that no one else could see and pressed it on Yutong's forehead. Under the shining blue light, the ability granted by the ability card penetrated into the girl's body. The card owner cannot use the ability granted to the card for 3 days. Logan and Yutong, forget it. But S.H.I.E.L.D. is just starting out, and we do need enough elite personnel to keep the place in check. Kyle pondered for a moment, then made up his mind and said, I have a suitable candidate. I don't need friends, just having a boss is enough. Yutong no longer used the ability to transmit her voice this time, but spoke firmly and persistently in a soft and childish tone. Don't worry, I'm always reasonable and won't touch them casually. I'm just going to collect some debts. Kyle smiled faintly, and this sentence shocked everyone present again. The Soviet Red Room, the super agent organization, and the rumors? Joseph was shocked, as if he had thought of something, and said in even greater shock, Wait, are you going to touch them? Howard raised his wine glass confidently to taste the wine. Joseph withdrew his gaze in awe and fear, and Fury was busy wiping the cold sweat from his forehead. Symbol of peace. No matter how brilliant the title of a god-level hero is, it cannot conceal the fact that it was won during the dark and bloody period of World War II, at the cost of countless soldiers' lives and a horrific record of destroying families and nations. As the night deepened, Howard, Joseph, and Fury said goodbye to each other. After they left the manor, the second floor of the building fell into a long silence again. That's good. Kyle nodded calmly. The super agent has been stored and has not been used on any family member. Super agent empowerment successful. Kyle laughed dumbly, staring at Yutong beside him, and pulled out a blue ability card from the card space. S.H.I.E.L.D. is a double-edged sword. If it is not used properly, it will become a disaster. If it is used well, it will be a very useful force. A sneak attack on you? What are they thinking? Howard couldn't help laughing. Tell a joke. Kyle makes sense. None of the three guests just now had any ill intentions towards the boss. Yutong said via telepathy. Fury immediately swore an oath like a military order. Kyle, I promise you here that as long as I am here, S.H.I.E.L.D. will never do anything that goes against its original purpose. Kyle leaned back on the sofa in silence. Outside the door of the reception room, a large pillow acted as a magic blanket that floated and moved, carrying Yutong, who was wearing pink pajamas, to sit beside him. There are many things that the Carl family is not convenient to intervene in, but they can be done boldly and in a high-profile manner through S.H.I.E.L.D. recognized by the United Nations Council. Don't worry, you've seen the person, and he's somewhere else now. Kyle thought for a moment, flipped open the long-forgotten notebook, and looked around at everyone. Use your own intelligence-gathering methods to help me get all the information and intelligence about the Soviet Red House tonight. In other words, it was fortunate that all the people in the reception room were old acquaintances. Otherwise, even if the new president and Admiral Chester came, Kyle would not give them face and deal with them with a little humanity and a pleasant face like he is doing now. Fury quickly reacted and explained. You don't know. The Soviet Red Room once sent a female agent to sneak into a battleship and attack Kyle during World War II. She was born with the ability to strengthen her mind, and now with her overall physical strength. Yutong is definitely the strongest person in the Carl family, second only to Kyle and Venom in their symbiotic state. Who is it? Fury asked quickly. As mentioned before, Yutong serves as his sharp blade. Sometimes, for his sake, all potential enemies with disloyal intentions can be eliminated, including members of the Carl family. No one dared to question the truthfulness of Kyle's words, because the bodies of those who had questioned them were still lying in the graves on the battlefield, and weeds were about to grow out of them. How is it? Kyle asked, touching Yutong's little head. Chapter 123 Soviet Red House. The next morning, a bunch of intelligence information about the Soviet Red House was collected by Fury and Joseph through national and military channels and handed over to Howard. Howard performed simplified statistics on the supercomputer and then transmitted it to the manor by telegram. There are nearly 20 suspected hidden locations of the Soviet Red House, many of which are probably false intelligence deliberately leaked by the Soviet Union and mixed with the locations of some military bases. The most accurate hidden location has an authenticity probability of less than 10%. There is no way around it. You have to know that as the cradle of the spy organization with full support from the military of the Soviet Union, No one knows the exact location of the Red House except for some Soviet high-ranking officials and internal personnel, because it has always been the super agents of the Red Room who have successfully infiltrated other countries disguised as secret spies, and there has never been anyone who can track and locate them in reverse. Fortunately, Kyle had already made a backup plan before this. When Natasha Romanoff was imprisoned on the battleship, the electric shock collar put on her neck was a key item. That black technology was produced by Howard himself, so it was certainly not an ordinary product. In addition to the instantaneous release of high voltage and the difficult-to-remove anti-unlocking function, the electric shock collar was also equipped with a micro-positioning device. Kyle was very sure that since the Red House valued Natasha Romanoff so much and sent other agents to take her back at all costs, they would definitely return directly to the Red House base, and then let professional technical personnel remove the electric shock collar. Before the electric shock collar lost its positioning signal, Howard naturally collected this information. On that day, Kyle wanted to win the battle quickly, so he ordered Logan and Yutong to follow him, and asked Howard to arrange the fastest transport fighter plane to fly from New York to the Soviet Union. At this time, the Soviet Red House did not know that a nuclear-like trouble was on the way. The Ural Mountains of Russia, with Novaya Zemlya extending to the north. The desolate plain was extremely vast, with ice and gravel sticking together to form frozen soil that spread across the ground, and the sky was covered with dark clouds and a gray haze. Yutong raised her little face and expressed her opinion through psychokinesis. Not necessarily. The most dangerous place is sometimes the safest. If the Red House is around here, then the people who are conducting nuclear weapons experiments here should know some information. This cooperation is already quite mature and complete. This really seems like the style of the Red House. Kyle sneered, retreated from the radiation area, turned back to call Logan and Yutong, and the three of them quickly headed towards the mysterious area. At least the Soviet military would deliberately avoid the area where the Red House was located when conducting nuclear weapons test bombings. Kyle was lost in thought. When he looked up, all he could see was a remote wilderness with no human habitation. On the tragic ground covered with corpses, only 2 girls survived tenaciously. Wilderness areas outside the boundaries of the radiation zone. As they were approaching the nuclear explosion test area, Kyle saw many military tents built together and researchers in white protective clothing coming in and out, so he went into stealth mode and moved over. The positioning signal was cut off in this area. There must be a man-made information jammer. Kyle and Yutong's pupils contracted, and they subconsciously tensed up. For the two who had escaped the nuclear explosion, this explosion scene was too familiar. Does that mean we've come to the wrong place? Logan asked in surprise. After a while, Kyle shook his head in vain and muttered coldly. A new rookie assistant, who is worthless even if he dies. Is it a nuclear weapon? Logan was also shocked and looked solemnly at the explosion in the distance. But the three of them soon relaxed their overly tense defenses. Just as Kyle was thinking about trying to split up and search, a faint light of daylight lit up at the end of the site not far away, and a dull little mushroom exploded and rose up. Kyle approached a researcher, and with a simple and neat knife move, he knocked the man unconscious and dragged him behind a tent. Without his reminder, the venom generated black tentacles that shot out, the tips of which pierced into the back of the opponent's head, forcibly searching for his memory. Since the Battle of Risen, the Blue Eagle has disappeared, as if buried in an unknown corner of Tokyo along with the pursuing fighter planes. The ground, the snow, and the air all carry some radioactivity, but it is nothing compared to the massive amount of nuclear radiation that invaded the body in Rising, Tokyo. It's windy. The main reason was that the mushroom explosion only covered an area of less than 100 meters, and it stopped a little disappointingly. If this could be considered a nuclear bomb, then the nuclear weapon was too weak. Their pretty faces were full of ferocity, and their white skirts were stained with blood. They were like wild beasts fighting each other with only their instincts left. When they ran out of strength, they used their teeth as weapons to bite each other's necks. White cold frost snowflakes, mixed with black burning dust and black ash, floated in the air and landed on the hooded leather jacket that Kyle's venom transformed into. That's right. Kyle nodded, agreeing with this point of view. This large wilderness area was designated as a Soviet nuclear weapons testing site, where they could conduct bombing experiments at will without regard for civilian casualties. The only thing that the top brass repeatedly warned against interfering was a mysterious area nearby. When Kyle, Logan, and Yutong arrived here, the air temperature had reached below minus 20 degrees Celsius near dusk, and water would freeze into ice. There are often a large number of girls in plain white clothes who are dropped into the wilderness bordering the radiation zone and the mysterious zone from time to time, leaving only a scarce supply of food, leaving them to fight each other for survival in the harsh environment of extreme cold and hunger. If it weren't for the trouble of attracting the attention of the Soviet military, Kyle wouldn't mind wiping out the entire nuclear weapons testing team head-on. I see. This should be the Soviet Union's nuclear weapons research and development test site. Kyle shrugged. It would be really unlucky if he could encounter a nuclear explosion wherever he went. However, he did not lose heart. When he saw another researcher walking towards his tent, he hid and lurked again, repeating his previous ambush tactics. Otherwise, it should be of the greatest use at this moment. The surviving girl who finally gets food and survives for a week, her white clothes dyed blood red. Her humanity has been cold and numb, and she will be taken away by the people in the mysterious area. Fortunately, Venom got the memory information he wanted to know in the second person's mind. This feeling. Wait for me here. I'll be back soon. Kyle instructed and accelerated towards the shapeless nuclear explosion test area. Boss, do you think the Red House base would really be located in such a haunted place? Logan exhaled, and a cloud of hot air gushed out of his mouth as white smoke. More than a dozen bodies of young girls in white clothes lay in a mess on the dark brown frozen soil. Some of them had their eyes wide open, and their bodies were covered with scars and frozen into stones. Chapter 124, Natasha Romanoff's Enlightenment. Natasha Romanoff curled up on the ground, trembling all over, and tried to get up weakly. Suddenly, another girl came forward and sat on her, grabbing her slender white neck under her bright red hair with both hands. The girl's face was pale and haggard. Her eyes were bloodshot and filled with wildness and madness. She growled hoarsely, "Die. Why aren't you dead yet? Emily, let me go." Natasha Romanoff held the other's wrist with both hands and continued to fight in vain in the desire to survive. The frozen soil scratched her body's surface and turned it brown and purple. Natasha Romanoff, please stop breathing. Natasha Romanoff shuddered when she heard the request from the girl riding on her. Emily, who was once her only friend and classmate, now desperately wants to kill her in order to fight for the last bit of food and the chance to survive under the rules of the Red House. This is the true human nature and cruel reality. Emotions and compassion are burdens. Only by treating herself as a killing weapon without emotions can she survive to the end and become the strongest agent, Black Widow, in this organization. Natasha Romanoff tilted her head and saw, in the corner of her eye, the remains of young girls' bodies that had frozen to death before they could rot were piled up on the desolate wilderness. A tear flowed from the corner of her left eye and immediately froze in a frost along with the blood. These were the last tears she would shed in her life. From now on, the fragile female self would be completely wiped out from the bottom of her heart. Sorry, I want to live too. Natasha Romanoff's face turned cold. She kicked her feet upwards, crossed her legs with amazing flexibility, and also grabbed Emily's neck and pulled her back. Tooth for tooth. Emily didn't expect Natasha Romanoff still had the strength to fight back. She was shocked and used all her strength with both hands, trying to strangle Natasha Romanoff completely. Emily, you still forgot that I was the one who secretly gave you the fighting lessons. If only one of us is destined to survive, let me carry your share and continue on my way. Using the coordinated efforts of her wrists, waist, and calves, Natasha Romanoff pushed Emily's hands apart and suddenly rolled forward, turning 180 degrees in the air with her calves clamped around Emily's neck. Tara's first stared at Logan, who was approaching, raised the large-caliber pistol in his hand, and said coldly, "If you take another step forward, I will shoot." But just one word was enough to change Natasha Romanoff's current situation. She took a deep breath, squinted her eyes, and said, "Then take me away from here." "Well done." You are worthy of being my daughter. Now you are the real Black Widow." The man smiled happily and did not even bother to stop clapping. "Pa, pa, pa, Logan, go bring her over here," the hooded young man ordered. The short-haired uncle next to him immediately ignored Tara's with a gun and quickly approached Natasha Romanoff. Next to the hooded young man, the petite girl looked at Tara's coldly, her eyes slightly glowing with silver light. At this moment, a cold and calm voice suddenly sounded from behind. Natasha Romanoff heard this familiar male voice and tried to open her eyes wide. Hope appeared in her empty pupils again. Do you think I don't exist?" Tara's was shocked and angry. From beginning to end, the three people who suddenly appeared did not look at him directly. Tara's, Natasha Romanoff gritted her teeth, her red hair covering her face, and her eyes revealed between her hair were filled with resentment and coldness. Eliminate the agent's emotions and memories, and even erase their humanity, as long as they can follow the procedures and complete the espionage and assassination missions issued by the country. I won. Natasha Romanoff gasped for breath, her hands and feet weak as she fell to the ground in the cold wind, her stomach growling with extreme hunger. She asked, "Does what you said last time about asking me to join you still count?" This is the Red House, a powerful organization that ensures everything is done perfectly. Tara's was extremely confident about this. He stepped forward and was about to take Natasha Romanoff back to the Red House organization. Natasha Romanoff opened her mouth without a second thought, biting into the small piece of dark bread and swallowing it without chewing it too much. "Boss, I haven't told you to move yet." At this time, Logan, unobstructed, had already walked up to Natasha Romanoff, grabbed it with one hand, and easily carried it on his shoulder. "Very good look. You will become the strongest agent in the history of our Soviet Red House." Tara's praised, not caring at all about Natasha Romanoff's hatred and resentment towards him. Anyway, everything is meaningless after the brainwashing process. Tara's turned around in surprise. Behind him, on the vast frozen wilderness, a strange group of a girl, a young man, and an old man were walking. The old man had a cool head of short hair, and both the girl and the young man wore hooded tops that covered most of their faces. Now he has even reached a verbal agreement with Natasha Romanoff to take away the top agent trained by the Red House right in front of him. A burst of applause broke out inexplicably. Natasha Romanoff weakly raised her eyes and saw a middle-aged man in an officer's uniform walking towards her. Taras Romanoff, her adoptive father, one of the senior officials of the Soviet Red Room, trained and urged her to become a cold-blooded agent spy. That was done by other agents in the Red House. "It has nothing to do with me," Natasha Romanoff explained weakly, her body still lying on the ground in a mess, and she couldn't help laughing as she spoke. "Okay." The hooded young man nodded and gave a simple response. Successfully recovered, a Black Widow. Logan ignored Tara's advance, which made Tara's forehead bulge with anger. He pointed the gun and pulled the trigger. Tara soon realized that something was wrong. No matter how hard he tried, the trigger of the pistol seemed to be restrained by a force, and he could not press it down to fire the gun. As Natasha Romanoff cried out in her heart, a cold light flashed in her eyes, and she used up the last bit of her strength. Tara's face changed, and the pistol in his hand flew out of his hand, suspended in the air, with the muzzle pointing back at its owner. "Natasha Romanoff, you look really ugly right now." With a crisp, snapping sound, Emily's neck was broken in midair, and she fell to the frozen ground with her eyes dim and without any luster. But the hooded young man in the lead didn't even look at him. His eyes fell on Emily, and he said slowly, "Don't lie on the ground and pretend to be dead. Last time you escaped from the battleship, you also killed more than a dozen of my soldiers. I haven't settled the score with you yet." She bit the frozen ground with her teeth, crawling and moving her body, and soon stopped beside a small pile of black bread stained with blood and snow. "Residents nearby? Don't you know that this is a restricted area under military blockade?" Tara's asked coldly, pulling out a large-caliber pistol from his waist with his left hand. Although there were 3 people on the other side, he also possessed the top human physique of a super agent, so there was no reason to be afraid. Chapter 125. Compromise in the Red House. Who are you? Aiming at the large-caliber pistol suspended in the air, Taras raised his hands with raised eyebrows, finally realizing that he had hit a wall this time. He looked at Natasha Romanoff on Logan's shoulder unwillingly and said in a calm tone, "No matter what, you can't take our people away. This is an area that the Soviet military focuses on. If anything happens, the nearest Soviet military base will send troops here." "Soviet army?" The hooded young man smiled faintly, not afraid to stop at all. "Why do I feel like I've seen you somewhere before?" Taras stared at him, his brows deeply furrowed, and a bad premonition arose in his heart. Taras, Natasha Romanoff, who was on Logan's shoulder and knew she was safe, blinked and said sarcastically, "You are a senior staff member of the Red Room and are familiar with intelligence information from all over the world, but now you can't even recognize the man in front of you." Taras frowned and looked at the hooded young man who was the leader of the three people, trying to identify him from head to toe. Just then, the young man looked straight at him, and the half of his face covered by the hood was as handsome and cold as a knife, with confident and bright blue eyes, revealing an indescribable majesty and oppression. "Wait, you are?" He gasped as he recognized it, his whole body shaking, and he was horrified beyond words. "Oh my God! Why did that evil demon come here?" "Mr. Kyle, why did you come to our Soviet Union? Premier Stalin has wanted to meet you for a long time, but the U.S. State Department didn't even notify us." Taras smiled bitterly and cursed himself for thinking of it earlier. The only person who could make Natasha Romanoff change sides and ignore the military threats on Soviet soil was the man in front of him. Kyle, the symbol of peace, is a legendary figure who ended World War II and is promoted as a godlike superhero in America. You should know that I retired from the U.S. military, right? Now I am only speaking for myself," Kyle said as he pulled down his hood, revealing his shining blonde hair. Isn't it enough for him alone? Another Red Room executive was helpless and thought, "If we can compromise and pay a price, resolve this matter peacefully, and ask him to leave the Soviet Union, that would be the best outcome this time. What are you still standing there for?" Taras glared at the guard, wiped the sweat off his forehead with his sleeve, and said hastily, "Hurry up and open the door, and send someone to notify the senior staff that a distinguished guest has arrived. There is an important matter to be discussed in a meeting. That is, the other party does have the capital and strength to threaten them." He didn't need to say it. The three people who were able to sit in the senior positions of the Red House actually knew it well. Inside the reception hall of the main building, deep in the mysterious wilderness, the Soviet Red House base. With a devilish smile on his face, he said, "During the war, you Red House owed me something, and it's not a small amount including the interest. If you don't mind, I can go to your base near here and sit down and talk slowly. It would be best if the problem could be solved reasonably. After all, no one wants to actually fight with that man," Norris said coldly with a straight face. "The super agent reagent equation is the foundation of our Red House's ability to produce top-notch agents. We will never hand it over." "I understand." Taras was sweating profusely and nodded heavily in agreement. He said that he is retired now and that he only expressed his personal opinion and that it did not rise to the level of a conflict between countries. The Red House has not been discovered by outsiders for so many years. "How did he find it?" asked Norris, the supreme leader of the Red House. "Absolutely not." Norris and the Red Room executives' faces changed drastically, and they refused in unison. Taras requested 10 minutes of discussion time and walked into the conference room with the other two senior Red House officials and discussed behind closed doors how to deal with this emergency. The moment he knew Kyle's identity, he realized that this matter was not something he could handle alone. "It doesn't matter anymore." Taras held his head tightly and said irritably, "What matters is that our careless mission offended Kyle before, and now he has brought people to our door to demand an explanation and the so-called debt. Too rampant." Norris punched the round conference table to vent his anger, and the dull sound echoed in the conference room. "Commander Taras is back." This was the first time that the Red House had hosted an unexpected guest. The most important thing was that the other party was too powerful. If things went wrong, it could turn out to be a catastrophic event that could endanger national security. Taras, who was usually high-profile and arrogant, was seen bending his body and following a young man with a low profile, leading him to the gate of the base. Behind him were a little girl carrying a sword and an uncle carrying Natasha Romanoff. Any one of the three of them can destroy the Red House base. If three people come together, it will basically ensure that the other side will not have even the slightest chance of a comeback. Secondly, the super agent reagent equation must not be compromised. Otherwise, it would be better to fight to the death with the other side. Even if it means sacrificing the Red House base, it cannot give the United States the ability to create super agents. Kyle sat calmly in the window seat. The red houses were all retro bungalows with floor-length curtains of the same blood-red color. Under the sunlight outside, the interior was filled with a bright red light. The problem is, Kyle is now determined to take Natasha Romanoff away, and Natasha Romanoff herself has also betrayed the organization and agreed. And, under the surprised gaze of the other two, Tara sighed and said, "He said that he wants us to hand over the reagent formula of the super agent." The Red Room executive opened his mouth wide and stammered. "How can this be a negotiation? This is clearly a threat." Tara's moved his lips, but said nothing. The armed soldiers guarding the gate of the base were solemn and were about to open the door to welcome them. But soon they were stunned in surprise and doubt. World War II has just ended not long ago, and the hero, the symbol of peace, has come to the door on his own initiative. Everyone would be nervous when he was called, let alone the Red Room organization, which knew it was in the wrong. "Yes," the guard responded quickly. "Of course I know this, but Kyle also said that if we don't bring out items that are sincere enough, he will destroy this place in 10 minutes. No, in less than 5 minutes. Tara's looked up at the clock and said bitterly after finishing his message, "First of all, Black Widow Natasha Romanoff can be discarded. No problem." After some more discussion, when Kyle had only 1 minute left, the three senior members of the Red House finally reached a compromise consensus. But in order to ensure that Kyle would accept their compromise and return peacefully, the three of them added another thing to replace the super agent's potion formula. Logan and Yutong both had worry-free expressions on their faces, as calm as if they were in their own manner. Kyle and the others sat down in the reception hall of the main building of the Red House. The next batch of training agents were collectively called over and entertained as servants. This is what Kyle calls a quick victory. Get out the door on the same day and finish the job on the same day. Chapter 126. Infinite Recipes and Winter Soldier. Tara's, Norris, and the top three of the Red House executives came out of the conference room, followed by several female agents in tight black wallets. Seeing this, Kyle in the reception hall glanced at the time on the clock and said with a calm smile, "There are 10 seconds left. It seems that you have already discussed and made a decision. Mr. Kyle, we hope to resolve the conflict between us as much as possible. After all, fighting here will not be good for both of us. You don't want the world, which has finally restored peace, to be ignited by war again." Tara spoke first. "This is just a matter between me and your Red Room. It has nothing to do with the United States. I believe that the Soviet leaders will not rashly become my enemy because of your Red Room." Kyle shrugged and said confidently and domineeringly, "He still has information and intelligence about the Soviet Union's nuclear tests. He has too many handles and supports. In addition, due to the huge disparity in strength, the Red House has no way to stand on the same line with Kyle to negotiate conditions. We will pay a corresponding price as a bargaining chip." Tara's lowered his head and clenched his fists with a little shame, which made Natasha Romanoff, who was lying next to Logan in a semi-conscious state, frown. This was the first time the Red House compromised, and Kyle's face was simply terrifying. "Agree to give me the formula for the super agent reagent?" Kyle looked at the three senior executives with a half-smile. The Red Room, which always sucked blood from others, was willing to pluck its own hair under pressure this time. "We agreed to hand over Natasha Romanoff and use another item to replace the super agent reagent equation," Tara said in a deep voice, clapping his hands lightly. A female agent behind him immediately came forward with a reagent tube and handed it to Kyle respectfully. "What is this?" Kyle asked, his eyes falling on the reagent tube, and the relevant item card information appeared instantly. "Infinite Formula. A reagent that can slow down the aging of various body functions. Blue item card. It can give the recipient an extremely long life and peak physical strength. It must be used continuously, with one injection every 3 years. Once the injection is stopped, the body will age rapidly. The infinite formula is a reagent of equal value to the super agent reagent. It does not require long-term and human training and has no rejection or side effects. It only needs one injection to exert its magical effect of extending life and stopping the aging of body functions. Tara's explained, but his simple words concealed a lot of information, such as the fact that the infinite formula required continuous injections. However, Kyle, who had read the card message, had already understood it. He nodded slightly, picked up the infinite formula potion, and put it into his leather jacket pocket. Super Agent. As long as you have Natasha Romanoff in your hand, you can draw cards and spend time to copy and grant abilities infinitely. Infinite Recipe. Injection use is not classified as an ability card, but can be given to Howard as an experimental drug for research and crack for mass production. In his eyes, the infinite formula is definitely 10 times more important than the super agent reagent. It's a pleasure to work with you. From now on, the conflict between us has been resolved. Kyle smiled gently, stood up, and snapped his fingers. Logan understood and carried Natasha Romanoff on his back. Yutong also jumped down from the sofa chair whose feet could not reach the floor. Tara's, see the three guests off. Norris and the Red Room executives breathed a sigh of relief and hurriedly asked Tara's to accompany the uninvited guests to see them off. The main entrance of the Red House base. With Tara's earnest farewell, Kyle and the others arrived at the gate of the base unimpeded, under the surprised gazes of the armed soldiers. Mr. Kyle, I'll drop you off right here. Tara's forced an ugly smile and said to Kyle, Tara's, you are such a hospitable and warm person. Next time I come to the Soviet Union, I will definitely come to visit you. Kyle patted Tara's shoulder affectionately, which made Tara's expression change drastically, and he almost couldn't catch his breath. Just kidding, just kidding. If you don't offend me, I won't have the time to come to your house specially. Kyle said confidently. When Tara's heard this, his face turned pale, and he felt as uncomfortable as if he had suffered a loss and had a pile of shit. Then I'm leaving. Kyle waved his hand and walked out of the door with Logan and Yutong. At this moment, a figure rushed out from the group of soldiers without warning and pounced over quickly. Careful! Yutong's eyes flickered with silver light, and before she could use psychokinesis, the figure rushed up to Kyle and swung down the cold mechanical arm swiftly, with the tip of the fist carrying a howling wind pressure. Kyle dodged sideways, only leaving a slight scratch on his chin from the mechanical arm, and then the mechanical arm missed and hit the ground, and the concrete floor immediately cracked and collapsed under the extremely strong impact force. Now, everyone saw the true face of the figure. He is clearly a tall and strong European and American young man, wearing a cool black jacket and long brown hair. What is even more eye-catching is that his left hand is a pure mechanical arm, painted with a red 5-star mark. What a terrifying power! Looking at the cracked floor with a radius of half a meter, Logan's pupils shrank slightly. As he was carrying Natasha Romanoff, it was inconvenient for him to participate in the battle. He could only watch the young man who launched the surprise attack and continued to attack Kyle indifferently. How dare you attack the boss? The silver light in Yutong's eyes shone brightly, and the armed soldiers within 10 meters around exclaimed, but all the guns on their bodies took off under the control of telekinesis, and the muzzles of dozens of guns were densely pointed at the enemy youth. Don't do it! Kyle suddenly stopped him. He looked at the familiar young man in front of him and greeted him with a little surprise. Bucky? Are you Bucky Barnes? The young man's movements paused slightly. He looked directly at Kyle through his messy hair. There was a slight wave of emotion in his eyes, but they quickly returned to their emotionless indifference. He continued to move closer, attacking Kyle relentlessly. Have you forgotten me? We were comrades in arms. Kyle spoke with anger in his words. He was not targeting Bucky, but the Red House who brainwashed him into this war machine. Bucky acted as if he didn't hear anything and launched an attack with his left arm, which had become completely made of metal. With the help of mechanical properties, his punch easily broke through tons of impact force. Wake up! Kyle raised his eyebrows. This time he did not dodge, but punched out with his right fist with full force. Fists collide. Vibranium arm guards versus mechanical arms. Neither of them took a single step back. With a huge, dull sound. The dust waves were blown away from them. Not awake yet? Then I'll wake you up, Kyle said coldly and punched Bucky in the chest with his other fist, knocking him out like a sandbag. Bucky knocked down the base wall, climbed up from the pile of rubble and dust without any problem, and looked at Kyle indifferently. No one gave orders to Winter Soldier, and he didn't even know why he attacked this very familiar-looking blonde young man. The only remaining memories and humanity remind Winter Soldier that only by attacking Kyle can he have a chance to leave this hellhole that binds him. Chapter 127. Kyle's in to be honest. When Bucky lost control, Tara's, who was standing next to him, still had a glimmer of hope that Winter Soldier, the strongest man in the Red House but not yet under full control, could kill Kyle by mistake. But when he saw Kyle taking Bucky's strongest mechanical attack head-on, Tara's body and mind felt like they were poured with a plate of ice water, and they felt very cold. That's a mechanical punch that's more than 10 times stronger than a human's. You're just going to take it like that? Next, when Tara saw Winter Soldier, the Red House's proud masterpiece, being kneaded and bullied back and forth like a sandbag in Kyle's hands, he was completely shocked and speechless. What's going on? The other two senior executives heard the unexpected noise and rushed to the gate of the base. When they saw Kyle fighting with the rampaging Winter Soldier, they secretly groaned. Winter Soldier, stop it! The Red Room executive who was responsible for brainwashing Winter Soldier was about to step forward and give orders to stabilize Winter Soldier, but under the gun controlled by Yutong's mind, he had no choice but to stop before he got within 10 meters. No one is allowed to come near. Yutong spread out her white and tender hands, her eyes sparkling with silver light. She used her extraordinary thoughts to control the situation outside the battle, not allowing others to affect the battle between Kyle and Winter Soldier. Well, it's more like one-sided bullying than fighting. Bang! In the central battle, Kyle violently dragged Winter Soldier's mechanical arm, swung him up in the air, spun him around in a full circle, and suddenly threw him out with force. Winter Soldier flew out again with a blank expression on his face. He landed on the ground with his feet and used his mechanical arms to hold on to the concrete floor. He plowed 3 grooves on the ground and finally stopped his body amid a cloud of dust. He's quite capable, almost as good as Steve. Kyle gave a fair evaluation. Winter Soldier Bucky is almost as strong as Captain America Steve, who holds the shield. Their physical strength and fighting skills are almost the same. The only difference is that one has an adamantium shield to withstand damage, while the other has a mechanical arm for powerful attack. One is the top and the other is the bottom. There is nothing wrong with them loving and hating each other. Kyle doesn't care how strong your attack is. When it comes to strong attack, Captain America, Winter Soldier, and Black Widow are all younger brothers and sisters in his eyes. Steve! Bucky seemed to recall something when he heard the name. His empty and cold eyes showed some emotion. He held his aching head with both hands and kept talking to himself. I knew it. Even if you forget my name, you won't forget Steve Rogers. Kyle smiled, slowly walked closer to Bucky, and continued to guide the narration. Have you forgotten? Steve is your best friend. You once saved him from gangsters in the streets of New York. Steve also broke into a German factory to rescue you. Steve's name was like a key, driving Bucky to hold his head and roll back and forth on the ground, as if the dusty memory bank was forcibly opened. The Red Room executives outside the battlefield saw this scene and whispered urgently, "Oh no, Winter Soldier's original memory is about to be revived. With that man here, we can't do anything. We are powerless." Another senior executive, Norris, shook his head and advised. Kyle looked at Bucky rolling on the ground and continued to approach him. You, me, and Steve, the 3 of us were on a mission. In order to save Steve, you were thrown out of a high-speed train and fell off a glacier cliff hundreds of meters high. Steve, a moving train, a glacier cliff. Bucky shuddered and opened his tightly closed eyes suddenly. He looked up at Kyle beside him, and his eyes gradually regained their clarity. Welcome back, Sergeant Bucky. Kyle bent down and stretched out his hand. Bucky grasped it tightly with his mechanical left hand and stood up with the help. His first words stunned everyone around him. Major Kyle, I didn't expect to meet you here. Major? Kyle nodded with a strange expression on his face. No one had called him by that name for a long time. What? Is that wrong? Bucky scratched his head. Logan carried Natasha Romanoff over and explained. The boss was promoted to Major General a long time ago. Of course, he applied for retirement after the war. Major General? Wait, you said the war is over. Bucky was stunned. During the brainwashing in the Red Room, even he didn't know that more than half a year had passed outside. I'll tell you about Steve on the plane back. Kyle patted Bucky's shoulder comfortingly and glanced at the people in the Red House. I can help you kill them. How about that? As those undisguised cold words came out, the armed soldiers and senior staff of the Red House turned pale and stared at Bucky, trembling all over. Bucky took a deep look at the Red Room executives, shook his head and said, "Forget it. They saved my life, and their brainwashing and control of me is my repayment to them." When the people in the Red House heard this, they sat down on the ground as if relieved. "Then let's go." Cole didn't care and walked out of the base. Logan, Bucky, and others followed him. Not long after they left, the guns that were floating in the air above the base lost their mind control and fell to the ground like raindrops. Howard's personnel were arranged on the transport plane returning to New York. Really? Steve, that guy actually? Kyle, you actually ended World War II? A superhero who is the symbol of peace. Bucky was filled with emotion when faced with the new information. He felt sad and surprised at the same time. He had not expected that so many things had happened to him in the Red House in the past 6 months. He was in a trance for a long time before he recovered, especially when he knew that Steve's fighter plane crashed into the ocean and both he and the fighter plane were missing. He sat in the seat of the fighter plane and sighed repeatedly. Logan put the unconscious Natasha Romanoff on the seat. His sharp eyes seemed to have discovered something, and he looked at Kyle's face in surprise. "Boss, your chin." Kyle raised his eyebrows and reached out to wipe his chin. Some sticky blood smeared on his fingers. But the minor wound caused by Bucky's punch had not yet healed. "Sergeant Bucky, right? Your mechanical arm is made of sodium carbon steel?" Logan asked Bucky. "Sodium carbon steel?" Bucky muttered and raised his mechanical left arm blankly, shaking his head and saying, "It's just made of fine steel mechanical parts." "Then why?" Logan was interrupted by Kyle halfway through his words. "Don't worry, I'm fine." "Boss, will you get hurt too?" Yutong asked curiously. She had seen Kyle get hurt, but even the huge trauma caused by a nuclear explosion would heal in just a few seconds. "It's just a minor injury." Kyle responded calmly, his fists clenched quietly. His heart was far from being as calm as he looked. Just now, when he was in the Red House base, he found that his self-healing ability had failed. It was not a failure, but it was temporarily suppressed by the changes in his body and could not be displayed. Really, after the nuclear explosion in Tokyo, his body had some unknown problems. After arriving at the airport, Logan, "Take them back to the manor first. I'm going to Stark Industries to talk to Howard about something." Kyle instructed. "No problem." Logan nodded. "Yutong, the mind ability can deal with Bucky's out-of-control situation very well. You should pay special attention to it." Kyle instructed, walked over and kneaded Yutong's little head. Yutong nodded obediently and solemnly. Kyle didn't know what was wrong with his body that caused his self-healing ability to fail, so there was no need to tell anyone and make the Carl family worry in vain. And he himself must let Howard find out the root cause of his physical problem as soon as possible. It was late at night in New York on the 52nd floor of the Stark Industrial Building, Medical Research Classified floor. The entire floor was silent. Only Howard, wearing a white coat, was in a brightly lit isolation ward. He was operating the medical testing equipment with a tense expression and busy performing tests. Kyle was lying naked in a high-end medical testing chamber. His perfect body looked like a work of art made of steel, and green light was scanning him back and forth. Half an hour later, the medical cabin opened, and Kyle inside seemed to have sensed something and stood up, putting on a simple shirt. Howard untied his mask, exhaled deeply, and stared at Kyle, saying more solemnly than ever before, "Some detailed test data has not yet been obtained, but I roughly know your physical condition." "Go ahead." Kyle nodded calmly, without any panic on his face. "Your body is infected with a large amount of nuclear radiation. This radiation value, even if it is only 1,000th, is enough to make ordinary people feel dizzy and have a fever on the spot. If it exceeds 1%, you can be tortured to death by illness within a few years. Howard said this with a wry smile. With such a large amount of nuclear radiation penetrating deep into your bones, you are still alive now. You can only be described as Superman. But you are indeed a Superman. Your metabolism is more than 5 times that of humans, and your super strength, speed, and physical fitness are 10 times that of humans. You are simply the perfect evolution of humans. This should be the theoretical peak potential that the super soldier reagent can achieve. And then there's the incredible self-healing speed. Your blood contains a mysterious factor energy, and it's precisely because of this that the nuclear radiation symptoms in your body are suppressed and eliminated. Howard was amazed. Kyle propped his chin up and asked, "So, other than losing my self-healing ability, there won't be any major impact on my body? How is that possible?" Howard frowned and shook his head. The point is not the symptoms caused by nuclear radiation. Originally, your super soldier gene had been stable and perfect, but now under the infection of radiation, it has begun to slowly break and collapse and try to reorganize. Will I mutate a second time? Or potentially a first mutation? Kyle pondered. Don't you realize how serious the problem is? If you become stronger than you are now without reducing your natural lifespan, that's called evolution. Howard paused, then spoke slowly and with difficulty. The genes you are recombining will indeed induce powerful abilities. But before the genetic recombination is complete, you will gradually lose your abilities and even your life. Genetic abilities are like a flood. Even with the damn strength of your current Superman body, you still can't hold out for long. Kyle shuddered but still asked calmly, "How long will it take?" "Less than a year." Howard's words, like the decree of the death god, announced the end of Kyle's life. Listing comments, the latest chapter of the book, Kyle's End, also reflects the author's situation from the side. Some book lovers may say that putting books on the shelves is basically a scene of selling misery in order to solicit subscriptions and rewards. Indeed, the author kneels down here, not expecting any reward, but asking the book friends who have been with him until now to continue to subscribe and support. Subscribing to one chapter is really not expensive, and each of your subscriptions can alleviate a little bit of the author's life pressure. Otherwise, it is simply unrealistic to write a book solely based on passion. I quit my job this month due to some unpleasantness and have been unable to sleep due to anxiety for a while. I hope this book can give me some proof. After midnight tonight, the book will start uploading VIP chapters. You can also vote for monthly tickets. Please support us by first order, reward, and monthly ticket. In fact, the author does not have many manuscripts in reserve, but they burst out every day during the National Day Golden Week. For the first order of 3,000, we will guarantee 3 chapters per day. For the first order of 4,000, we will guarantee 4 chapters per day. And so on. The 8 chapters 10 you will also be given extra. Chapter 128 Target, Universe Star, Subscribe, Gene Mutation, Less than a year to live. Kyle, who was sitting next to the medical cabin, felt like he was struck by lightning. His fists clenched tightly, making a crackling sound. This was too cruel for him. He had just changed the chaos of World War II, almost a year ahead of schedule. He has a life-enhancing card that has accumulated for 500 years and has just entered the peak of his life in this era. He had just founded the Carl family, was in control of Stark Industries, and single-handedly accelerated the establishment of S.H.I.E.L.D. He had long-term plans and plans for the next 50 years. And now, everything is back to zero. Genetic mutation is irreversible. Kyle is now like a wheel that burns the more it rolls. Unless he rushes into the sky and becomes the eternal sun, the rest of the consequences will be to wait for death and embrace the goddess of death. Right? Let's go to the sky. Kyle seemed to have thought of something. His dim blue eyes rekindled the light of hope, and his mind was spinning rapidly as he fell into deep thought. Sit back and wait for death? This has never been his style. Howard, this is the infinite equation I got from the Red House. Through continuous injections, it can prolong life and stop the aging of body functions without side effects. Kyle said, waving his left hand, and the infinite equation potion turned from a card into a physical entity and fell on the operating table. Upon hearing this, Howard quickly took the reagent in his hand and said excitedly, Could this thing possibly save you? Kyle shook his head gently, not wanting to hit him hard, and said, "This thing is useless to me. My super soldier physique and self-healing factor can originally achieve the effect of the infinite equation. Infinite equations, life-enhancing cards, and even the healing elixir senza beans from before are of no use to him now. After all, genetic mutation is not a disease. Of course, I am sure I can leave the Earth." Kyle took a deep breath and placed his hope on the space stone. "But how are you going to leave the Earth? Right now, humans are still at the theoretical level in the field of aviation, and we don't even have the ability to reach the nearest moon." Howard, as a top scientist, subconsciously used scientific theories to overturn Kyle's fantasy plan. Howard thought for a while and answered, wondering why Kyle mentioned that backward independent country. Since Kyle values it, Wakanda must have something good to offer. You know Wakanda, right? At some point, Howard, who was a proud believer in science, had quietly come to believe Kyle's words. "You tell me, I'll arrange it right away." Howard nodded quickly. "Leave the Earth and go to the universe?" Howard was stunned and couldn't keep up with Kyle's train of thought and thinking. "Regarding the construction of the family base on the turtle-shaped island, I have already contacted the construction company this morning. They have secretly prepared the tools, materials, and a large number of development workers. According to the design I gave, it is expected to be completed in about a month. Don't worry, I haven't given up, and this isn't my last words." Kyle spread his hands and said in a spirited voice, "I want to live more than any of you, to see more heroes and powerful enemies in the future. I won't leave so soon. Before that, I will clear all obstacles on Earth for you and pave the foundation and road for you. Then this." Howard put down the infinite equation reagent in his hand in disappointment, and Kyle continued, "You're still considering us now? Then what should you do? Forgive me for not being able to think of a solution right now." Howard said, painfully due to the limitations of his perception. Howard seemed to be infected by Kyle's confidence and asked anxiously, "You have always been able to create miracles. What are your ideas and plans this time? In my opinion, the Earth does not have the biomedical level to solve this kind of genetic mutation. As long as the physical strength evolves further, it can withstand its own genetic mutation and complete the transformation from insect to butterfly. I don't know how Stark Industries and the Carl family will change the world in 5 years, let alone 10 or 50 years." Howard sighed, looked directly at Kyle, and said sincerely, "My friend, I will develop a potion for the infinite equation, so that I and the Carl family can live longer, and we can see the beauty of technology in the 21st century together." Kyle nodded, his eyes glowing, and he said something shocking. "So I can't stay here and wait to die. I want to leave the Earth and go to outer space to fight for a glimmer of life. Mobile phones and communications, computers and the internet, these two technological products and categories will be exhibited at the World Expo, taking advantage of the economic recovery after the war. They will create the framework and dawn of the information age. With this, Stark Industries can leap to the position of a world-class company in a few years." Howard had a strong premonition that after Kyle left the Earth this time, the two of them might never meet again. "An old friend named Obadiah Stane is willing to manage Stark Industries for me. The specific shares have been transferred to the Carl family. I can concentrate on being a logistics staff and researching artificial intelligence that represents future technology. I promise you," Kyle promised. There were already too many things on this Earth that he couldn't give up. The Space Stone has the ability to open the Rainbow Bridge, space tunnel, and build the law of any two places in the universe. This thing is prepared for you. After you study and crack it, you can try to replicate it on a small scale for yourself, Fury, and the Carl family. He will come back alive. There is no doubt about it. There is one more thing. You arrange someone to do it." Kyle narrowed his eyes. He wanted to open up a broader technological road for Howard and the Carl family as soon as possible. "Since my current super soldier physique cannot withstand the pressure of genetic mutation and recombination, I might as well go to outer space, where there are various races of the Galactic Alliance and the Asgard gods who built the divine realm. They must have physical ability cards that are above the blue grade." Kyle assured Howard that he still had at least a few months to stay on Earth to prepare and pave a smooth road to guide them into the future. Howard was a little sad, but he quickly cheered up and reported on his recent work. But you must come back. Promise me. Kyle decided to bet everything on the space gemstone, gamble on his damn luck, and try to control the opening of a rainbow bridge leading to the ideal planet. That's right, only outer space can solve my physical problems. Kyle said firmly, it should be an isolated, poor agricultural country in northeastern Africa. That's good to know. No matter what means, we must establish friendly relations with Wakanda. Kyle gave the order. Howard didn't understand, but he quickly agreed. This is Kyle's personal charm, enough to attract people around him to admire and follow him. Even if he goes to the starry universe, it will definitely be the brightest and most brilliant star of mankind. After Howard finished speaking without leaving out anything, Kyle smiled faintly. I trust you to do the work. Chapter 129. Unlucky Mage Blue. That night, Kyle rested in a room equipped in the Stark Industries building. The next morning, Kyle came out of the building and walked on the sidewalk wearing a leather jacket with a hood, letting the early sun bathe his body. In the symbiotic state, the venom can mitigate the genetic mutation caused by radiation, and it is currently the only thing that can extend the lifespan of less than a year. Looking at the family of three chatting and laughing as they passed by, Kyle recalled the last conversation he had with Howard last night. Don't tell anyone other than me about my health, including members of the Carl family. Are you afraid that they will worry? I think everyone should know that you are our indispensable pillar. If you leave suddenly, the sky will fall. I will naturally tell them when we are about to leave the Earth and head for the universe. Telling them now will only add to their troubles and worries. 3 months. I will only keep it secret for you for 3 months. Kyle sighed, feeling extremely unhappy. Now he felt like an old man who had entrusted his funeral affairs to others and was hiding the fact that he had health problems from his family. He had too many things to worry about. On the one hand, he had to race against death to win time, and on the other hand, he had to spend time building the foundation of his family's power. Half a year. The maximum time I can stay on Earth is only half a year. After half a year, I will use the Space Stone to go to outer space and seek ability cards of blue quality or above. Kyle made up his mind and walked on the modern streets. Suddenly, he looked up in surprise and saw that the city streets around him were distorted and changing in a regular way. The voices and figures of passers-by faded away quickly, and in the blink of an eye, he found himself in an empty and elongated, deserted city. Here we go again, mirror space? Kyle raised his eyebrows in annoyance and looked around. Sure enough, he saw a black man who was suspected to be the caster standing not far behind him. I'm Blue, a wizard, the black man said with a little arrogance. He was wearing a simple black wizard uniform, with a strange square ring on his hand and a delicate staff shaped like a small round stick in his hand. Are you the Kyle that the Sorcerer Supreme mentioned? I've wanted to meet you for a long time, but you rarely come to the New York area under my jurisdiction. By the way, you must be curious about how I did it. Unfortunately, it is too supernatural and magical for a mortal like you. Master Blue was saying this proudly, but he saw that Kyle in front of him had changed into a black battle suit, and he walked forward with his fists clenched coldly. Master Blue suddenly had a bad feeling in his heart. What do you want to do? I just happened to be in a very bad mood. I didn't expect that someone would come to my door on their own initiative. Kyle showed a devilish sneer, stretched his muscles and bones, and squatted slightly to gather strength. He kicked hard and flew towards Master Blue like a cannonball. So fast. Master Blue's expression changed drastically. He quickly raised his hands, and while his staff was spinning, bits of golden magic power formed a brilliant circular pattern to block in front of him. Almost at the moment when his defensive shield was built, Kyle's fist quickly landed on it, and the bombarded patterned shield shone with golden light. I'm quite capable. Kyle licked his dry lips, looking at his prey with fighting spirit and murderous intent. His fists extended into dark blades, stabbing fiercely at the patterned magic shield in the void. He just temporarily lost his self-healing ability, but that doesn't mean he lost his dominance in this era. Under Master Blue's incredulous gaze, the magic shield suspended in his hand began to disintegrate and collapse, and the tip of the sharp blade almost broke through his palm, shattering the shield with just brute force and claws. Is this a monster? Master Blue didn't have time to think too much. He raised his hand, and turned the round stick staff. The magic power at the end of the staff condensed into tough golden threads. "Vatu's wand," he shouted softly, and the wand turned into a long whip, swinging forward and lashing at the wind. Kyle dodged sideways, and the long whip condensed from magic gold threads fell on the street, burning and splashing a large number of gold stars. "I can do this too," Kyle pondered secretly, and saw Master Blue continue to twitch his whip. His left hand retracted the upward movement of his sharp claws, and the venom imitated the black silk of his body and condensed into a whip shape. Venom suit, whip form. Kyle twitched the long whip in his left hand, and with a whistling gale, it entangled with the whip of Master Blue. Just as Master Blue was about to pull back with force, he felt a terrifying force from the whip that was far beyond his imagination. At the last moment when the staff was about to slip out of his hand, he hastily released the whip's technique. "That's all?" Kyle smirked and twitched the long whip in his left hand. The whip whistled in the air and hit Master Blue's body. No matter how much a wizard comprehends the laws of nature and masters the extraordinary power called mana, his body is still that of an ordinary person. How could he dare to withstand a whip that is 10 times more powerful than a human's? So, Master Blue turned around and fled spinelessly. His boots were a magical tool called jumping boots. As he jumped, golden circular symbols appeared on the soles of his feet. He could actually step on the void and jump up as if he were on flat ground. When Kyle raised his eyes, Master Blue had already escaped to a height of more than 10 meters with a series of leaps. "Now that I'm here, how could I let you get away?" Kyle smiled, canceled the whip shape of his left hand, and sped up as he rushed towards the tall building next to him. He stepped on the walls and glass windows that were 90 degrees to the ground, climbing and running as if he were walking on flat ground, and the distance between him and Master Blue was getting closer and closer. "That's outrageous." He clearly didn't use any magic. Master Blue in the air was dumbfounded, looking at Kyle, who was walking and chasing on the tall building beside him. Ignoring the laws of physics, he felt a chill on his back. "Then don't blame me. I won't hold back anymore." Master Blue gritted his teeth, muttered a spell, and waved his hands back. The mirror space is not just a dimension that isolates the real world. The mages can also use the rules and laws here to simply control the form of the mirror space. Kyle was running on the wall when he suddenly felt the space flipping. The tall building he was on began to move and twist, pressing him down between the ground and him. Soon, the front of the tall building was connected to the floor, and Kyle's figure disappeared from it. Master Blue landed lightly on the back of the tall building, looked down blankly at the quiet city streets, and muttered to himself, "I killed someone? Think too much." A cold voice suddenly came from inside a high-rise building. A humanoid monster with a black leather body rushed out and smashed the glass of the building. Just as Master Blue was about to raise his staff to cast a spell, a black whip stretched out and shot out, tightly wrapping around the round staff in his hand. Before he could finish his horrified words, Kyle, who was in full coverage, rushed forward and punched him with controlled force. Master Blue was hit hard on the head, his eyes rolled slightly, and he fell straight to the ground. "Ah, an idiot who came to my doorstep, a mobile card drawer." Kyle shrugged, and the hood faded from his face into a black liquid. In a good mood, he began to deal with the human-shaped trophy of Master Blue. Chapter 130, I am also a mage, someone said. When God closes a door, he will open a window for you. Kyle didn't know if this was compensation from the goddess of fate. He had just learned that he didn't have much time left, and then a stupid wizard came to his door and offered him warmth and benefits. It would be fine if he came here to show off his mage profession and magical superiority, but he chose to come at such a suicidal time. At this moment, Mage Blue, who was lying unconscious in the mirror space, had the word miserable written all over his body. "Let me see the spell abilities that you have mastered." Kyle rubbed his palms and stared at Master Blue as if he was looking at a naked goddess, his eyes flashing with a faint green light. His eyes and thoughts fell eagerly on Master Blue. In just a moment, hundreds of white and green cards appeared densely. There are also 4 blue ability cards that stand out clearly, interweaving and shining with blue light. 4? Kyle was shocked. It was the first time he saw someone other than himself holding so many blue ability cards. But then, he opened his eyes even wider, and a purple ability card finally jumped out of Master Blue's body, emitting purple light, and proudly hovered above the 4 blue cards. Medium mirror space. Enter the mirror space of another dimension. Purple ability card. By using the hanging ring, one can enter another dimension that coexists with the real universe. Although the mirror space originally exists, it is not perceived by people. The scenes in the mirror space are mirror-like to the real world, but everything that happens here has nothing to do with reality. Inside, one can secretly observe people and things in reality, avoid danger, and create a home battlefield. Part of the form of the mirror space can be appropriately controlled. Use the skill to pull yourself and any creature within a 10-meter range, up to 10 humans, into the mirror space. The cooldown time of this skill is 3 hours. Note, after the mirror space is damaged to a certain extent, it will be difficult to maintain stability, and the creatures trapped inside will escape back to the real world. Current status can be extracted, requires holding the hanging ring artifact. What a pity! It's just a skill-type ability card. Kyle couldn't help but frown, but soon relaxed. There is nothing to regret about this, as mages originally did not have ultra-green grade physical ability cards. Otherwise, they would not be called mages. The other 4 blue ability cards are all the same, spell skill type ability cards. Portal spell. Can open a circular space portal. Blue ability card. Using the hanging ring, imagine a destination in your mind. The degree of realism must be over 80%. Stand in place for 3 to 5 seconds and draw a circle manually to open a small portal that spans the 2 places and lasts for 10 seconds. The transmission distance is limited to the distance of a planet based on the Earth, and there are other constraints and restrictions in outer space. Current status can be extracted and requires the holding of the hanging ring artifact to use. What are you talking about? Master Blue hurriedly got up and said, "Without me, you can't leave here. How is it possible that you can cast spells?" Master Blue was stunned and doubted his own eyes and worldview. "Are you awake?" Kyle glanced at Master Blue, who had just drawn the last piece of loot, the mage robe, into a card. He touched his chin contentedly and said, "Let me think about what to do with you. It's time to go back." Kyle pondered and then remembered something. He squatted down and began to strip Master Blue of his magical equipment. Kyle tapped his forehead and reached out to take off the strange ring on Master Blue's left hand. The ring was dark black and needed to be held on 3 fingers. It was 5 times larger than an ordinary ring. "Oh, I almost forgot about the ring." Kyle smiled and stepped into the gorgeous portal of Mars spinning. Personally, he would rather kill Master Blue, but if Master Ancient One knew about it, the relationship between the two would inevitably become strained. Kyle had never drawn a purple ability card, but now he knew that the drawing distance limit remained the same, still 1 meter, and the card reading time was a full 3 hours. For blue ability cards, the extraction distance is limited to 1 meter, and the reading time is half an hour. What a good guy! Knowing that he needed to speed up the planning and preparation of the Earth, he hurriedly sent a series of space-related magic skills. Kyle's breathing was rapid, his eyes moved, and his gaze quickly focused on the second blue ability card. During the long hours of card drawing, Master Blue woke up several times with his great willpower, but before he could open his eyes, he was punched on the back of the head and fell asleep again. "Got it." Kyle raised his lips, waved his left hand, and 10 cans of dry food turned into solid objects and piled on the ground. He said, "This is for you. I hope that Master Ancient One will notice that you are in the mirror space before you finish eating the food and come and take you out." Fixed Portal Construction Mastery. Master the construction technology of fixed portals. Blue ability card. Current status: extractable. This thing is like a switch that opens the door to magic. It can connect people with nature and bring out the body's potential magical power. Without it, even if you master magic, you won't be able to use it. Wait, there are matching products. Mirror space, portals, fixed portals. Is this a whole set of welfare cards for shortening the distance to the Earth and space planning? Kyle sighed, and when he looked at Master Blue again, his arrogant and conceited dark face seemed much friendlier. Once a fixed portal is opened, Another void portal will open at the destination. Fix the void portal disappearing when the portal is closed and disconnected. The other two blue ability cards are the basic mages, Mana Shield, and Mastery of Magical Instruments. Master the technology to create a permanent portal that can permanently connect two different places. Each fixed portal is permanently bound to only one location, only within the Earth. However, Kyle was still happy to spend 3 hours to get the extraordinary spell to enter the mirror space. By the time Kyle drew 5 spell cards, Master Blue's head was covered with lumps and his head seemed to be swollen. 5 minutes later, Master Blue was in a trance, and by the time he reacted, Kyle had completely left the mirror space. Life Tribunal staff, Wand of Boots of Leaping. Who said that? Kyle put on the ring on his right hand, and under the dull gaze of Master Blue, he waved his palms, and bright sparks began to emerge, spinning into wheels in the air in front of him, opening a portal to the real world. All your spells belong to me. Kyle suppressed his joy, sat down next to Master Blue, and began to copy and extract the 1 purple and 4 blue ability cards one by one. Master Blue groaned in pain and felt his body regain consciousness with an unusual chill. He woke up from the overturned building and looked at his body in a daze. He found that his magic weapons and clothes had been stripped off, leaving only a pair of shorts. This spell? Kyle's eyes lit up. After mastering the portal spell, the usual means of transportation such as cars and planes suddenly seemed too low-level and useless. Sorry, I'm also a mage. These magical instruments are of little use to Kyle, but fortunately, they can be used as blue-grade sacrificial material cards. Since personal belongings cannot be taken out, we can only steal them physically. Chapter 131, Winter Soldier and Black Widow, the Carl family's estate on the outskirts of New York. Don't let go. Hold him down. Under the trembling gaze of the children in the corridor on the second floor. The wide hall on the first floor was noisy and chaotic, with a fierce battle between trapped beasts unfolding. 4 or 5 elite bodyguards in suits and sunglasses, holding broken tough military ropes, flew backwards from the center of the battle area in a panic, rolling on the ground and screaming. Normative ropes, can't tie him up. Send someone to get chains. Logan's face flushed during the fight, and he used his hands with bone claws to firmly clamp Bucky's sturdy arms from behind. Bucky, with disheveled hair, struggled madly like a wild beast out of control, roaring and growling. As the two wrestled, the gorgeous floor beneath their feet almost cracked. I can't hold on any longer, Logan warned. Bucky swung his mechanical left arm with its own power supply and slammed it down to the ground, throwing Logan forward with brute force. I'll do it. Natasha Romanoff, with bright red hair, rushed forward in time, dragged a 10-meter-long chain, and quickly put it around Bucky's neck. Bucky pretended to attack, but Natasha Romanoff dodged him flexibly and circled around him several times to tie the chain around Bucky's waist and neck. Finally, Natasha Romanoff, wearing a long skirt, knelt on Bucky's broad back and pulled the two ends of the chain backwards, making a crackling sound as the chain buckles tightened. Natasha Romanoff said in a deep voice, "Bucky, remember your identity quickly and don't let false memories erode your mind." Bucky turned a deaf ear to her, his eyes empty and cold, and pulled with all his strength, slowly pulling the chain in Natasha Romanoff's hand away. "Get out of the way!" The chains were about to break. Logan growled and suddenly rushed towards Bucky. Natasha Romanoff reacted and jumped away. The next moment, Bucky, who was wrapped in iron chains, was knocked away by Logan. He flew several meters and fell out of the main entrance of the building, rolling down the stone steps to the lawn of the manor. Bucky got up silently and mechanically, pulling at the chains on his body while moving forward to leave the manor alone. We can't let him leave in this state. Logan and Natasha Romanoff looked at each other and were about to get up and give chase when they suddenly saw the chains on Bucky's body quickly float up. Crash! The chain became like a living snake, automatically wrapping around Bucky's limbs and binding them. Finally, both ends of the chain were tightened and nailed into the grass next to him. Natasha Romanoff came out of the hall and looked up in surprise, and saw that the stretched car that went out to purchase supplies had returned to the yard and parked steadily. Lucy, the hostess of the manor, and Yutong, the second thug, had just walked out of the car. Yutong slightly raised her tender white hands and stared directly at the out-of-control Bucky with her silver eyes. It was obvious that she had used her mind to control the chains in time. "Well done." Logan breathed a sigh of relief, finally understanding why Kyle told Yutong to keep an eye on Bucky. As long as he didn't hurt the other party too much, only psychokinesis, which was more inclined towards control, could restrict his actions. "What should we do now? We are trapping him like this." The people in the manor were having trouble because of Bucky's out-of-control state. At this moment, sparks suddenly lit up from the main gate of the manor, and they rotated brilliantly to form a circular portal that could accommodate people. Kyle, dressed in a black battle suit, walked out of it. "Kyle, boss, head of the family, boss." Different names suddenly rang out from the manor, one after another. The young man who returned at this moment was the foundation and pillar of the Carl family. There was no doubt about that. "Boss, how did you get back?" Logan asked on behalf of everyone present. The magical portal behind Kyle was gradually dissipating, through which he could vaguely see the rooftop of a New York high-rise building, as well as the faint and noisy voices on the other side. "This is a spell. I'll explain it to you later." Kyle looked around and saw Bucky, who was chained in front of the main door. He frowned and asked, "Out of control?" Logan nodded. The first floor of the manor was covered with serious traces of Winter Soldier's loss of control. Needless to say, one could tell how intense the fight had been. Kyle looked at the bound Bucky and raised his hand with the dangling ring on it. As it continued to spin and stroke, a teleportation circle of Mars wheels expanded and took shape from the grass under Bucky's feet. "Yutong, let him go." "Okay." Yutong loosened the two ends of the chain with her mind, and before Bucky could struggle to move a step, he fell into the portal with a plop, and the Mars wheel disappeared. The people present blinked, not knowing what Kyle had done. "Let him get some fresh air and sober up," Kyle said, then looked at Natasha Romanoff, pondering how to arrange for her. Natasha Romanoff couldn't help but take a few steps back. Even a top agent was like a lamb in front of the young man. But she soon came to her senses and stopped. After all, no one forced her to come here voluntarily. "In half an hour, a family meeting will be held in the lobby on the second floor. I have something to tell you," Kyle said as he opened another portal, and at the other end was the master meeting room on the second floor of the manor building. "Natasha Romanoff, follow me." Kyle walked into the portal, and Natasha Romanoff followed him obediently, leaving the Carl family members with admiration on their faces. I have to say, with the magic portal, not only does it save a lot of travel time, but it also raises the level of quality by more than one level. A means of transportation exclusive to mages, except that the distance is shorter and the entrance is smaller. It is in no way inferior to the toner appearance of the Rainbow Bridge. In the main conference hall on the second floor, Kyle, sitting in his office chair, tapped the table lightly with his fingers and said straight to the point, "I don't completely trust you. You betrayed the Red House, and one day, under the pressure of a stronger force, you may turn against me. Then why did you save me?" Natasha Romanoff bit her lower lip and calmly sat down on the sofa. She had been used and abandoned many times and was accustomed to the feeling of not being trusted. She is far from being the weak and powerless girl she appears to be, but a true Black Widow. Once the mind, memory, and past experiences that are not to be exposed to the light are polluted, it is very difficult to make them clean again. Because you are still valuable to me, and the consequences of your betrayal will make you unable to escape the pursuit of the Carl family as long as you are on Earth. Kyle said this with confidence, and Natasha Romanoff was convinced. Kyle continued, "You must stay in the manor for the next 2 months and not leave. Come see me every 3 days for half an hour." "Oh, why?" Natasha Romanoff blinked her beautiful eyes with a strange look, and an inexplicable sense of anticipation surged in her heart. If Kyle takes a fancy to her, she wouldn't mind. "In 2 months, I will recommend you to Nick Fury to work in the newly built S.H.I.E.L.D. Whether you can gain the recognition of my family and clean up the stains on yourself depends entirely on your performance." Kyle interrupted Natasha Romanoff's speculation and fantasy and said slowly, Chapter 132, Family Meeting. 2 months is enough time to impart Natasha Romanoff's super agent to every child adopted by the Karl family. As for why Natasha Romanoff was not kept in the Karl family, Kyle had thought about it repeatedly. Natasha Romanoff was born as a top spy agent trained by the Red House. He did not want to ignore or change the positioning of this Black Widow. It would be more appropriate to send her to be placed in the top management of S.H.I.E.L.D. Let Natasha Romanoff serve as a bridge of communication between the family and S.H.I.E.L.D. On the other hand, it can also help the Karl family supervise and understand the internal situation of S.H.I.E.L.D. Kyle is about to leave the Earth to fight for the last glimmer of hope. With a long-term perspective, he will instinctively keep many backup plans for things that are not under his full control. S.H.I.E.L.D. is one of them. Since it is tasteless to eat and a pity to throw away, we will send people to secretly supervise and check it. Kyle looked him in the eye and stated bluntly, You just lost control and ran away. The people of the Karl family took a lot of effort to subdue you. After all, they were orphans after the war and suffered bullying and contempt from the hospital. They are much more sensible than other children of the same age. They are all trying hard and patiently to learn fighting courses. But Logan stopped hesitantly when he said this. In Kyle's opinion, all human children are equally weak. All they lack is the evolutionary key to unlock their body's potential and enough motivation. Kyle said in a deep voice, Being loyal to the Karl family is the first requirement. Anyone who has other intentions or is not enterprising will be cleared out of the manor. What I need are elite members who can protect and give back to the family in the future. Bucky hugged the metal mechanical left arm with his right hand and said hoarsely after making a decision, Kyle, why don't you kill me now? Give me a relief sooner and prevent innocent people from being injured and killed by the Winter Soldier deep in my memory in the future. In Bucky's case, his memory was destroyed and erased, and cold-blooded program instructions were implanted repeatedly. Over time, he mistakenly believed that he was born into a Winter Soldier machine with a mission. Steve, Bucky kept repeating, shaking his head and smiling bitterly. Will I ever see him again in this lifetime? When the Mars circle opened to a radius of 1 meter, Winter Soldier, with his body wrapped in chains, rolled out and fell awkwardly on the floor of the conference room. Even in the original movie, after the 21st century, when the Earth's technology shines brightly throughout the universe, Winter Soldier's condition still cannot be effectively cured. You finally recovered. It seems this trick is quite effective. Kyle pondered. I don't know if I can manage it. Lucy responded by raising her hand with dissatisfaction. Half an hour later, it was almost time for the Karl family meeting. Kyle ordered Natasha Romanoff to step aside, raised the hand with the dangling ring, and waved it, and a brilliant Martian portal emerged and expanded from the ceiling. In the Karl family, Kyle is the god of supreme power, and the laws and regulations he stipulates are the absolute rules here. Kyle tapped the table and gave a suggestion. I can freeze you in a freezer and store you in the basement of the manor. One day in the future, when there is a method that can cure your physical problems, the Karl family will thaw you and wake you up. That's what we'll do then. Thank you, Kyle. Bucky nodded gratefully, agreeing that this wasn't really a solution to the problem. Natasha Romanoff was also secretly surprised. In her opinion, this way of raising children was worse than the Red House. Kyle was silent, looking at Bucky's sad face for a while, and finally said softly, Of course I can meet your request, but if Steve is still alive, I won't be able to explain this to him when he comes back. As long as you have willpower and are loyal to your family, talent is not important. Kyle smiled and gave an example. Have you forgotten Steve? He was the one with the least talent in my class, but he became a superhero in the end. Freezing is a good idea to delay escaping the current situation. Kyle sat at the main seat at the large round table in the lobby on the second floor with Lucy, Logan, Yutong, and Natasha Romanoff, who was only considered a half-family member, on his left and right. Recovery. What's wrong with me again? Bucky looked at Kyle eagerly, desperate for an answer. Howard has secretly transferred Stark Industries shares and controlling rights to the Karl family. I will leave the entire family finances to Lucy. Is that okay? Kyle said seriously, looking at his fiancée, two trusted aides, and Natasha Romanoff. Logan, from today on, every 3 days, You will select one of the adopted children who has performed well in training. After Yutong's review, I will give him the opportunity to have a physique that is no less than Natasha Romanoff's. Yes, I remember now. I was controlled by those confused memories again. I wanted to kill, destroy, and act according to orders. Bucky muttered to himself, and suddenly smiled sadly, sitting on the floor decadently. I thought that after leaving there, I could become the person I used to be, but I couldn't escape the control of my brain's memory. The me before, I can never go back. His last sentence was purely an interjection, so naturally no one had any objection. Not to mention that all the family resources are prepared by Kyle. Just because Lucy is the future mistress of the family, she has more say in the Carl family than anyone else. This is nothing more than opening a portal, with the exit set directly above the portal, so as to achieve the purpose of using the portal to make people fall in a continuous cycle. Don't worry. Take your time to learn. If you don't understand, ask Howard. Kyle consoled him and asked thoughtfully, Logan, how is the fighting course for children adopted by the family? Kyle naturally understood what he wanted to express. Some children have high fighting talents, some have low talents, but no matter how high the talent is, it is really too low in the eyes of these people. The Carl family meeting at the manor was held as scheduled. What happened? Bucky climbed up in a daze, dragging the crisp sound of the chains on his body. He had been falling as if in a dream, and had been falling for more than half an hour. In half an hour, Kyle in the host conference room had Natasha Romanoff accompany him more, so that the super agent could be copied and extracted. This was the first time that Kyle brought up the selection and management of Carl family members. Logan nodded without hesitation. Although all the children in the manor were currently adopted by him, he would not plead for them if they did not meet the standards to become members of the Carl family. When Kyle learned about his genetic mutation, he also thought about freezing himself and sleeping peacefully until the level of technology in the future reaches a high level. Kyle did not say anything to persuade her. Even he found matters involving brain memory extremely difficult. But instead of pinning his hopes on others in the future, he would rather take the risk to go to the vast universe and rely on himself to fight for the opportunity card and break the genetic dilemma of his body. Chapter 133 Family Planning. The Carl family has been established for less than half a year since Kyle was founded. Compared with the historical background of organizations such as the Red House and Kamar Taj, it is not worth mentioning at all. But in terms of financial resources, it has the physical wealth of half of Germany's treasury and Stark Industries, which possesses top-notch technological products. In terms of connections, it has the new shield recognized by the U.S. military and the World Council. In terms of strength, it has the symbol of peace that stands at the top of superheroes and 2 independent mutants. As long as the rules and management system of the Carl family are well formulated, Kyle believes that it will develop rapidly like a rocket and become the most powerful private force hidden in the earth. No doubt about it. Logan and Yutong believed in Kyle's words without a doubt. Sometimes, even if they didn't understand some plans and programs that sounded incredible, they would obey the instructions and carry them out. On the contrary, the newcomer Natasha Romanoff became more and more confused and wondered, muttering in a low voice, "How is it possible to give others a physique that is no less than mine?" The super agent physique cannot be achieved by simply injecting a potion. Otherwise, the top agents in Hong Fangzi would not be born only once a year. Women must undergo various cruel training from a young age to develop their inhuman will, and then be injected with a super agent formula specially formulated for them, and then go through repeated life and death battles to tap the potential of the drug. It was not until the formula potion and the body were perfectly matched that she became the current Black Widow, Natasha Romanoff. She is the most powerful person who can perfectly display the level of a super agent since the establishment of the Red House. Now, Kyle actually said that he wanted to mass-produce her physical ability when super agents are cabbages. As if he had keenly heard Natasha Romanoff's muttering, Kyle asked calmly, "Oh, Natasha Romanoff, do you have any suggestions?" "No, I don't have any suggestions." Natasha Romanoff waved her hands quickly, and her bright red hair shook like a rattle. Kyle seemed to see through her thoughts. He hesitated for a moment and said, "Logan, Natasha Romanoff will be the deputy instructor during her stay at the manor. You two can work together to select and train the children." "Oh, okay then." Natasha Romanoff hesitated for a moment, then nodded helplessly. She was not allowed to leave the family estate for 2 months, so she had plenty of time to kill time. No problem on my end. Logan agreed quickly. He just wanted someone to share the task of raising the children with him. As a result, Lucy will be the chief financial officer in charge of the family's financial flow, and Logan will be the chief instructor in training family talents. The only core member of the family that has not been arranged is Yutong. Kyle's shining eyes fell on the quiet, black-haired little lowly. Lucy, Logan, and Natasha Romanoff also focused their eyes on Yutong. After spending some time together, they all clearly realized that Yutong, at the age of 8, could only rank last in the family. But her actual combat power was only second to Kyle. Every time she made a move, she was able to quickly control the situation with amazing willpower. Since she got the super agent card from Kyle, no one has ever seen Yutong show her full strength. In this era on Earth, she is still at the dominant level of combat power. More importantly, Yutong is a loner and doesn't like to talk. Her cognitive ability makes her mature and independent beyond her age. She is only slightly close to Lucy, who is the future mistress of the family, and is absolutely obedient to Kyle and protects him almost madly. Anyone who dares to say anything bad about Kyle within the confines of this manor, or even feels dissatisfaction and disgust in his heart, may die without knowing how. Rain Pupil. It is a sharp blade that lives only for Kyle, and it has always been like this. Yutong, she replaced me as the highest supervisor of the family, and has the power to kill any member except the core family members. Kyle said calmly and chillingly. As long as they are family members killed by Yutong, there is no need to find out the reason. They will all be buried on the grounds of betraying the family. In the past, Yutong was a secret family supervisor, but now he decided to give his family the power to kill openly, acting as a sharp blade that can intimidate the family. It's still the same problem. There is not much time left on Earth. All preparations and paving for the Carl family must be planned in the most direct and effective way. Chief Financial Officer Lucy, Chief Instructor Logan, and Chief Supervisor Yutong, as the three giants of the future Carl family, together with Chief Scientific Research and Logistics Howard and future SHIELD high-level spy Natasha Romanoff, are the 5 pillars of the family that Kyle has high hopes for. Even if he leaves the Earth and goes to the universe, as long as these 5 pillars do not fall, they can ensure the stable and sound development of the Carl family for 100 years. That day, after the first meeting of the Carl family ended, Logan and Natasha Romanoff, 2 people who were later collectively called Devil Instructors by family members, vigorously reorganized the training arrangements for the adopted children. The 2 of them used will and belief as the key points of the assessment and quickly selected the first superior child. After Yutong's test and review, they were transferred to the master room on the 2nd floor to have Kyle grant them the super agent ability card. Children who acquire super agent physiques are classified as the lowest level members of the Carl family, Carl disciples, and formally receive combat courses and harsh high-intensity training from Logan and Natasha Romanoff. After more than 10 days, among the 30 or 40 adopted children, nearly 10 were rejected and permanently expelled from the manor and sent to a remote orphanage nearby. 4 of the children passed the review of the instructors and supervisors and were given cards by the owner of the manor, Kyle. They only stayed in the office on the 2nd floor for less than a few minutes, and their overall physical fitness was more than 3 times stronger than before. These card players who have obtained abilities are like getting a chance from God. They easily break records in the original high-load training and become Superman in the eyes of other children. Soon, the children who had been living a comfortable life in the manor realized one thing from the bottom of their hearts. You must become a card player recognized by the Carl family. Becoming a card player not only allows you to stay in the manor protected by the God-level hero, but also allows you to improve your strength without any worries. If they were eliminated and expelled from the Carl family's estate, they would return to their previous hopeless and lowly life in the orphanage. As a result, all the adopted children in the manor became crazy and trained hard all day long, hoping to stand out and become the next card player. The children who became card players began to learn some information about the family and understood that as long as they worked for the Carl family all their lives, money, wealth, fame, and prestige would no longer be delusions. More importantly, Kyle not only gave them the physique of a super agent, but also gave them the definition of an evolver who transcends humans and masters abilities. Chapter 130, for the end of an era regardless of whether they possess genetic variants or mutations, master extraordinary magic, or are proficient in developing black technology knowledge. All of these that are superior to ordinary humans are simply collectively referred to as evolvers. Evolution can be said to be the primitive instinct that all living things are born with. That is, to become stronger and live longer than other individuals of the same species. Even the Ancient One wizard, who has mastered the mysteries of the universe and is dedicated to protecting the Earth, cannot avoid using the power of the dark dimension to forcibly prolong his life. Transcendence of nature, super ability, immortality, this is the ultimate goal of the evolution of the universe. Kyle told every new card player directly that in the Carl family, there is not only money, fame, magic, and black technology, but also the opportunity to obtain a lifespan that is 10 or 100 times longer than that of humans. Super Agent Blue Ability Card, which gives card players the path to becoming evolvers. Now Kyle illuminates the pyramid steps for them, allowing them to see the ultimate goal at the top of the pyramids. If you want to reach the top of the pyramids and get the opportunity to evolve continuously, you must rely on your own hands and feet to climb up step by step in the Carl family. Kyle first opened the door of opportunity for Ka2, and now they have enough motivation to fight for their whole life. How can they not go crazy? If Steve were still alive, maybe he and I could meet in the future, drink those unfinished celebratory drinks, date those unfinished girls, and talk about world peace, which we won't have time to talk about in the future. The children adopted by the manor are desperate to become family members' card players. The children who have become card players are even more energetic and full of energy, shouting every day that they want to become the strongest human evolutionists and live forever. Just like the large amounts of guns and ammunition during World War II, after world peace, many countries began to clear them out one by one. Bucky nodded and took a step forward into the cryostat. He turned around and lay down inside. Facing Kyle, he said, "World War II is over. I don't have any wishes anymore. So why not just let the war end and let me fall in a deep sleep in the ice?" Natasha Romanoff knew very well that in the eyes of the Carl family, once she lost enough potential value, her status as a newcomer would continue to decline. Therefore, she quickly withdrew her contemptuous look towards Ka2, faced up to her remaining experience advantage, and devoted herself to the work of the deputy instructor with all her strength. This caused Natasha Romanoff, who was watching the scene, to start to panic. She had thought that she was at least a super agent from the Red House, and that she would definitely have a good status after joining the Carl family. However, she did not expect that not long after, new card followers would desperately chase after her. A cross-century advanced freezing chamber, processed and modified by Howard himself, stands alone in the center of the dark room. The open door continuously gushes out white cold air, filling every corner of the basement. Bucky Barnes. At the end of 1944, it was frozen in the basement of the Carl family's original estate, unknown to the public. "You must also stay alive. Major Kyle, Sergeant Bucky, Sergeant Steve, I believe those three will be able to—" Bucky didn't respond. He raised his mechanical left arm, gently grasped the frozen door, and remained silent. Finally, he asked, "Do you think Steve Rogers is still alive?" The door of the freezing warehouse was firmly closed, blocking out Bucky's inner voice. Through the glass, one could see Bucky sleeping with his eyes closed, and the cold air in the warehouse quickly coated his body with a thin layer of frost. They are not standing at the pinnacle of the era. Their original existence represents an era, the war era of iron and blood, battle and fire. I think so too. That's why I chose to enter this freezer. Captain America, Winter Soldier, we'll meet again if we're lucky." Kyle muttered, a hint of sadness flashing across his blue eyes, and quickly disappeared without a trace. The two young men stood beside the freezer, looking at the white frost in front of them, each in silence, each with their own thoughts. Sleeping across time is like traveling through the future, which is undoubtedly a very cruel thing. Every new card player has physical abilities that are no less than hers, and they also have an ultimate goal, and they compete with each other in a healthy way from a young age. I will watch this era come to an end. But the problem is that the Red House can only stand at the top of ordinary organizations and has long been unable to break through. The Carl family, on the other hand, has all the soil to evolve and become stronger, and is endlessly cultivating true heroic strongmen. Bucky became a winter soldier, starting from the war and being frozen after the war, which is also an option. At least it can restrict his actions and prevent him from becoming a killing tool used by others. Unfortunately, this era is about to come to an end with the end of the war. After Kyle left, the lights in the closed basement went out and dimmed. The freezer in the darkness, carrying the sleeping winter soldier, seemed to fall silently into the huge vortex of time. In less than half a month, in Natasha Romanoff's opinion, the fighting power of the lower ranks of the Carl family has begun to catch up with that of the Red House. And this is because the Card disciples are too young and have zero combat experience. And my own battle and journey have just begun. Kyle turned around resolutely, opened the teleportation portal that seemed to be burning, and walked away without looking back. So, not long after arriving at the manor, Natasha Romanoff, the deputy instructor, realized something very terrifying. Goodbye, Bucky Barnes. Kyle manipulated the instrument button, and the door of the freezer began to slowly close. He shrugged and said, "I hope you have a good sleep." Kyle looked up at Bucky, who was dressed in winter soldier uniform, and asked in confirmation, "Bucky, have you really thought it through?" The room was originally piled with useless debris from the manor, but after being carefully cleaned and treated with disinfectant and freshener, it was now clean and empty under the bright daylight. What replaced it was cold determination, burning fighting spirit, and an unyielding belief. He paused and continued. "Once you enter the cryostat, you may sleep for 10 years, half a century, or a century before someone opens it again. Before that, do you have any unfulfilled wishes?" He decided to embark on a journey to the starry sky soon. No matter how dark and far the road was, he would risk his life to reach the other side and embrace a new life of evolution. Kyle was filled with sorrow as he saw off his old comrades from World War II one by one. Soon he would even leave the Earth on his own and head towards the unknown outer space. "I don't know," Kyle shook his head and said firmly, "but I believe that guy will not die so easily. Maybe he is sleeping in a corner of the world. One day, he will wake up and come back." This is the basement of the manor building warehouse, and the entrance has been sealed. Chapter 135, A Possibility. It overlaps with the dimension of New York City, in a mirror space that is not perceived by humans. The city streets were infinitely stretched, distorting the buildings that stood in the streets. The real vehicles and passers-by were reflected in the streets, and then disappeared in a flash. A black beggar wearing only shorts and with his upper body naked was walking aimlessly on the street. He was holding a bag with only half a can left in his hand, and his face looked haggard, as if he had aged by more than 10 years. Gurgle, Master Blue covered his deflated stomach, looked at the half-empty can in the bag, sighed weakly, and sat down dejectedly against the steps of a store. He has been here for 2 weeks since being robbed by Kyle. Losing the magic weapon, the ring, is like losing the key to open the portal to extract mana, and he can no longer use any abilities related to spells. A wizard without magic is at best just an ordinary person with slightly stronger willpower, trapped in this space which is far more despairing than the heart of the desert. The mirror space is constructed according to the model of real scenes and things, but has nothing to do with reality. There are no indigenous creatures here. Food items exist but cannot be eaten. All internal items cannot be used effectively or taken out of the mirror space. Am I really going to be trapped to death in this place? Master Blue felt desolate. He finished the last half of the can of food, pondered for a moment, and then used his fingers to pick out the residue from the gap in the can and licked it with relish. "It smells so good." "Brew!" A faint female voice, louder than the sound of nature, came from the side. Master Blue trembled all over and looked sideways. He saw a bald woman in a yellow robe, looking at him strangely. Supreme Mage. Mage Blue's eyes were full of tears. He paused for more than half a second in a trance, then danced with excitement, threw away the jar in his hand, and rushed towards Mage Ancient One. "Pa!" The ground protruded upwards in a regular pattern to form a wall, and Master Blue's face hit the wall, and crashed into it. Look at what you look like. Go back and wash yourself. The Ancient One wizard standing on the top of the wall shook his head and lightly waved the air in front of his nose. Even from a distance of 3 meters, he could still smell the stench on Blue. Blue was stunned for a moment and said anxiously, "Supreme Mage, you must seek justice for me." Kyle, he robbed all the magic weapons on me. Who told you to provoke others for no reason? Interesting. Kyle looked at the information on the form and asked with some interest, "You are a servant who is a few years older than those candidates. You are not qualified to be a card player. I didn't expect Logan and Natasha Romanoff to recommend you." The girl endured the burning pain all over her body and soon felt her body getting stronger. When her body was transformed successfully within half a minute, she looked at Kyle with even more passion and awe. Of course he is not a mage. The Ancient One mage's eyes were deep, and he said inexplicably, "But after meeting you, he might be one." Ever since he obtained those spell cards that contained the secrets of space teleportation, and the first fixed portal he had recently attempted to build was almost completed, he had a vague and concrete understanding of mirror space, the Earth's space structure, etc. "Did he really leave here with the hanging ring?" asked the Ancient One mage softly. "Why don't you look up?" Kyle asked, looking at the girl. Even Kyle didn't understand yet that granting ability not only saved the steps of drug injection and body matching, but also deeply imprinted the miraculous supreme ability on the body and mind of every family member who received the ability. What does this mean? Blue looked at the Ancient One mage in surprise. If he could come back, then she, the supreme sorcerer, would no longer be able to control him. Manor, the owner's meeting room on the 2nd floor. Yes, right in front of me. Supreme sorcerer, you didn't say he was also a wizard. Blue hung his head in dejection. Why did he provoke that ruthless man? You can leave now. Remember, you will be a member of the Carl family from now on. Kyle nodded slightly. The Ancient One wizard was reluctant to say more. With the help of the power of the Dark Dimension and the Eye of Agamotto, he still could not fully glimpse the actual future of Kyle. "Hello, Master." The girl handed the file to the desk and quickly lowered her head to look at the floor, not daring to look Kyle in the eye. Pity. If the Ancient One didn't come to him on his own initiative, he wouldn't be able to go directly to Kamartaj. The Ancient One mage's cold words made Brulio touch his nose in embarrassment. Kyle got huge amounts of card draws from Blue and initially mastered the magician's space teleportation skills. He coveted the cards from the Ancient One magician. Having said that, with Master Ancient One's control over multidimensional space, he should have perceived Master Neighbor long ago, trapped in the mirror space of the New York area. He wanted to support them so late, probably because he wanted to let his men learn a lesson. She is an old woman who has lived for hundreds of years and has been constantly exploring the world and magical powers. If you can draw an Ancient One wizard, even an ability card, then your journey into the universe will be more certain. Because the head of the family is not someone I can look directly at now. The girl raised her little face slightly and looked at Kyle with burning eyes, as if she was looking at a real god. Kyle secretly complained, but did not question the choice of Logan and others. Being overly loyal to him and being loyal to the family undoubtedly meant the same thing. A knock on the door disturbed Kyle's thoughts. After he answered, a maid dressed simply opened the door and walked into the room with a form file. If he can't come back, then all the disordered historical lines should gradually return to their original state. Finally, I know why she was recommended as an exception to become a card player. I can't explain it. From now on, don't get involved in anything related to him. Thank you, Patriarch. The new card disciple prostrated himself on the ground, the only way to express his complete loyalty. Because among the thousands of endings, there is only one possibility that Kyle can return to Earth. I do manor work during the day and practice on my own at night. Even though I'm a few years older, my potential is definitely not inferior to theirs. The girl said stubbornly. Kyle put down the detailed design of the new base, propped his chin with his hand, and said to himself meaningfully, "It seems that the Ancient One has taken away that stupid wizard." Kyle had no idea that the Ancient One wizard was deliberately avoiding him, not wanting to be involved in what the East called cause and effect, and involve more bizarre future possibilities. Boom, boom, boom. But why didn't the Ancient One wizard come to visit? According to the process, he gave Super Agent with a slight thought, and a transparent blue card was inserted into the girl's body, immediately transforming her genes and body. But no matter how many possibilities there are in the future, even if there are millions of possibilities, that man still cannot escape the fate of leaving the Earth, which is a good thing for her. Chapter 136 Card Level and Evolution Points in just over 2 weeks. 5 new card players have emerged in the Carl family's manner. Since the Carl family uses the Devil card as its totem, every child who is recognized and recommended by 2 instructors and the supervisor, and is given the Super Agent ability by the head of the family, Kyle, will hold an identity card representing himself as a member of the Carl family. The back of the ID card is a background pattern that combines elements such as a winged demon holding a sword and the starry universe, with a black and red background. The codes on the front of the identity cards currently held by the 5 new cardholders are Red 1, Red 2, Red 3, Red 4, and Red 5. The same will apply in the future. Even Red 99 is not excessive. It is just equivalent to a passing label, which means that you are recognized by the Carl family and are the lowest level family member. Above the red is the prefix Black, representing the elite members of the Carl family. Currently, there is only the Black Widow Natasha Romanoff, who is the solitary codename Black One. Above Hay, there is the prefix Jack, Knight, which represents the core members of the family. At this level are Logan, Yutong, and Howard. Howard is a strategic technology logistics non-family combat personnel. Although he has always been in the Stark Industrial Building because Kyle created the first fixed portal, the location is set in the basement of the Stark Industrial Building. The manor located in the suburbs of New York and the Stark Industrial Building in the center of New York were connected by a fixed teleportation gate. Only then did Howard become known and understood by all members of the Carl family. Family members also respectfully gave him the code name of Great Inventor, on par with Wolf King and Red Eye. Howard himself gladly accepted this, which made Kyle feel a little embarrassed for a while. In any case, the rules and regulations, selection and training, and grade division of the Carl family were all on track in less than half a month, and the base project on the Atlantic Dragon Turtle Island has been completed for the most part. In about 10 days, the Carl family will officially move from the manor to the island. Everything about the Carl family was developing rapidly in the direction Kyle had expected. This was the only thing that made him feel relieved, because in recent days, Kyle has been feeling more and more strange inside his body. Originally, he had only lost the outward manifestation of his super self-healing ability, but now, as 2 weeks passed, his unusually sharp perception would sometimes fail. This was certainly not an illusion caused by excessive inner worries. After all, even a person with a physique 10 times stronger than a human at its peak will lose some of his functions for a few seconds within 24 hours every day and return to being a normal person. On the morning of the 15th day, after Kyle learned about his genetic mutation, a single silver hair appeared in his temples, which was as bright as the sun. This is a sign of ignoring the natural lifespan and weakening life. The resistance of the self-healing factor in his body seemed to be decreasing day by day, and the genetic mutation caused by his own nuclear radiation began to slightly damage the super soldier's extraordinary physique, resulting in the above-mentioned side effects. In light of this situation, Kyle felt that the time he had left was far less than the 1 year predicted by Howard's initial diagnosis. So he went for a second comprehensive physical examination. Stark Industrial Building, 3rd underground floor. Howard had already prepared and arranged for people to work day and night to secretly transform it into a medical isolation room. All the medical facilities inside were up to world-class standards, specially designed for Kyle's diagnosis. Since Kyle developed a genetic disease due to nuclear radiation, this news was too serious. If it were to spread to the outside world, not only the United States and America, but the whole world would be shocked and shocked. Therefore, Howard was the only doctor who made the diagnosis, and he did not use even a single trusted assistant. At this moment, the underground medical isolation room was under bright lights. Kyle was wearing a large white hospital gown. His perfectly proportioned and strong body seemed a little thin. He sat calmly in the chair, patiently waiting for the final test results. Not long after, Howard, who was wearing a white coat over a shirt and suit and a mask, looked solemn and walked out of the room holding the test form in his hand. "Do you have any wine?" Kyle suddenly asked with a smile, trying to use a joke to ease the heavy atmosphere. "What kind of wine are you drinking? Do you know your current physical condition?" Howard slammed the test sheet on the table so hard that even Kyle was stunned. This was the first time he saw the usually gentle and amiable old gentleman get so angry. "I'm sorry, I lost my temper." Howard took a few deep breaths and sighed. "I feel useless and can't help you at this moment." "It's okay." Kyle nodded in understanding and asked calmly, "Tell me, how much time do I have left?" Howard slowly stretched out one hand and spread out 3 fingers of his other hand. 8 months. Kyle fell silent. The remaining time was too tight, as if Death God was constantly urging him to get going. "Kyle, if you are really sure, then you should leave the Earth as soon as possible and head for the starry sky. With us in the Carl family, there will be no problem." Howard held Kyle's arms tightly with both hands, looked at him with pain and said, "Look at yourself. You are recognized by the people as the strongest God-level hero. You have experienced file-sized battles continuously without a single wound, but now you are like a terminally ill patient. Are you sure you are still hiding it from your family? I will need at least 2 months." Kyle said firmly. The number of card players is far from enough now, and the construction of the family has not reached the expectation that he can leave. Howard continued to persuade. "Then how did you hide it from those people in the family? Logan and Yutong are not ordinary people. They will definitely find out that there is something wrong with your body. Let's keep it a secret for as long as we can." Kyle shook his head, holding his breath to gather strength. His muscles swelled and grew stronger, returning to his original perfect, healthy, and superior physique. "I can't do anything about you." Howard sighed helplessly, knowing that he could not persuade Kyle, so he could only report the latest research progress to him. "I have already researched and solved the formula of the infinite formula. However, the cost of making a reagent is as high as $200,000. It is possible to produce it continuously to meet the needs of a few people. But if you want to cover dozens of family members, I am afraid that even the current Stark industry will find it difficult to support it." Kyle had a plan in mind and said, "The infinite formula reagents we are making now only need to be provided to the core members of the Carl family. The Card disciples are still young, and when they need the infinite formula reagents to delay aging and prolong their lifespan, they will need to work hard to exchange them for evolution points." Evolution points? Howard blinked, confused by this new term again. Chapter 137. Heading to Wakanda. Although the Carl family is a hidden neutral force, in order to keep the Card followers fighting and training, the family will secretly establish an underground mercenary organization in the world. It will be open to the public and will be temporarily recruited by others who pay items of sufficient value. Only one Card follower will be sent out for each order. The money or items that Card players earn legally through their own strength and hard work can be exchanged for the Carl family's contribution points, which are evolution points. Evolution points can be exchanged for infinite formulas, various black technology weapons, etc. In this way, the Carl family will be self-sufficient. As soon as Kyle finished his explanation, Howard nodded thoughtfully, understanding why he had taken so much trouble to define evolution and evolution points. When there is healthy competition and goals in the family, it will run faster and faster even without any promotion. By the way, have you ever come into contact with Wakanda? Kyle suddenly remembered this important thing. Wakanda. Howard scratched the back of his head awkwardly and answered helplessly. "I specially asked someone to go there to conduct an on-site investigation and found that the local area is remote and the living standards of the original indigenous residents are extremely low. I originally wanted to donate some materials in the name of Stark Industries, but I didn't expect that the local people would not appreciate it at all and even showed resistance." When he heard the message from his men, he was surprised for a long time. In the years just after the war, there were still poor African countries that refused to accept material donations. When Kyle heard this, he looked strange and asked, "What did you donate?" "Some daily necessities, quilts, clothes, and so on. These are things that are urgently needed in Africa. Is there any problem?" Howard asked in surprise, not understanding. "Kyle, it's like donating a coin to a millionaire. No wonder Wakanda didn't take Stark Industries seriously." "Forget it. "Do you have any photos of Wakanda?" Kyle asked Howard directly. Howard was stunned for a moment, but still found the photos from the local investigation records and handed them to Kyle. The black and white photo shows the plains and mountains where Wakanda is located. In the distance, you can vaguely see the grazing natives and various simple primitive houses. Kyle memorized the scene in the photo, drew out his venom, and transformed it into a hooded leather jacket that he usually wore when going out, and urged, "Get ready, I'm going to Wakanda with you." "Now? We're going to Wakanda?" Howard was shocked. This was really a trip that they were not prepared for and could be started at any time. "I don't have much time left on Earth, so I'd better do everything I need to do as soon as possible." Kyle shrugged, his tone quite helpless. "Time is running out. The 50 years that were once enough time on Earth have now been shortened to 2 or 3 months. Then I'll prepare for the plane now." Howard nodded heavily, took off his white coat, revealing the shirt and suit underneath. "No need." Kyle chuckled, raised a finger with the ring on it, and slightly rotated his other hand in circles, and the sparks in the underground isolation room rotated and turned into a transmission portal. "Come with me." The circle of Mars took shape, and Kyle spoke as he quickly stepped forward into the portal. "I almost forgot that you have this trick." Howard shook his head and smiled bitterly. Even though he was used to it, he still found it incredible. He quickly followed Kyle into the portal, and together they disappeared into the isolation room on the 3rd underground floor. Wakanda, Africa. Suddenly, a Martian wheel circle appeared in the wilderness, and the figures of Kyle and Howard emerged from it, stepping out of the portal and standing on the grass. "Have we really come to Wakanda?" Howard exclaimed in amazement. Looking at the scene in front of him, which was exactly the same as the photo, he was sure that it was Wakanda. Although he had seen Kyle's unreasonable way of traveling many times, he was still amazed and found it difficult to understand the mystery behind it. They were in the basement of the Stark Industrial Building in New York just a moment ago. The next moment, we arrived at the other side of the world. "This is too unscientific." Howard couldn't help but complain. Kyle waved his hand to cancel the portal behind him, smiled, and said, "Wait a minute. I'll show you the science of science." At this moment, a few black spots appeared in the distance on the vast wilderness grassland in front of the two people, as if something was approaching them. Howard pointed forward curiously and asked, "What is that?" Kyle had extraordinary vision and could see several times farther than Howard. He saw things clearly and said slowly, "The local guards are coming here on rhinos." "What?" Howard was shocked and said hesitantly, "I heard that if you enter Wakanda without permission, the local natives will be angry and brutal and drive you away directly." "Kyle, you should be able to beat them, right?" "Nonsense, but I didn't bring you here to fight," Kyle said unhappily, waving his left hand holding the ring, and the surrounding scene was reflected like a mirror. "We're just standing here?" Howard watched as 3 dark-skinned natives with bare upper bodies rode on huge rhinos and came closer and closer. The savage aura was raging, and he couldn't help but hide behind Kyle. Kyle remained motionless and calm. The natives on rhinos approached within 3 meters, but completely ignored the 2 of them and flew past them quickly. The strong native man in the lead pulled the rope, and the rhino under his crotch stopped kicking up dust. He muttered to himself, "Did I see it wrong? There was clearly an outsider here just now." The other 2 natives sat on the rhinoceros and looked around. Their eyes fell on the grass where Kyle and Howard were many times, and then turned to other places without stopping. "Why didn't they notice our presence?" Howard looked at the natives less than 10 meters away and asked in astonishment, "Kyle, what did you do?" "We are now in the mirror dimension, not in the same dimension as them in reality." Kyle patted Howard's shoulder and gestured to the front area. "Let's go. Let's go deep into Wakanda from the mirror dimension and explore its interior." Mirror space is a high-level voyeur spell that is exclusive to mages. It allows them to avoid external dangers and hide in hidden spaces to observe people and things within a certain real-world area. As long as you enter the mirror space in advance, you can move inside and ignore the external guards and defenses to reach the real-world area you want to explore. Kyle and Howard walked in the mirror space, corresponding to Wakanda, passing through the indigenous communities and mountains on the grasslands. Finally, the 2 came to the deepest part of Wakanda, an amazing hidden place. "Oh my God!" Howard exclaimed. The dreamlike scene before him made his eyes go straight, and his body and soul trembled violently. Kyle looked ahead, shook his head, and said, "This is the Real Mind series." Chapter 138. City of the Future. Deep in Wakanda, hidden under the wild mountains and forests, in the center surrounded by clear rivers, sits a majestic city rising from the ground. Howard couldn't find another adjective to describe it. Majestic. He thought that he had been to all the developed cities in the world, but none of them could compare with the city before him. The high-end modern skyscrapers do not stand out from the crowd like those in New York and Washington, but are clustered together, reflecting the cold brilliance of glass and metal in the sun. The suspended train passes through the sky above the city's busy streets from the overhead light rail. The ultimate prosperous scene created by technology and the fantasy structure of the future can be witnessed here with your own eyes. Kyle and Howard stopped at the irregular edge of the mirror space, looking at the future city reflected in the mirror image of the outside world, and were amazed by this immortal city filled with the light of technology. This is the true face of Wakanda. Some explorers have been looking for centuries, but they have never found it. This is the legendary City of Gold. Kyle said this, chuckled, and shook his head, saying, "It is too inappropriate to describe this place as gold. There is an almost inexhaustible supply of vibranium mines here. In the eyes of the world, gold is a representative metal used to describe and measure wealth, but compared with vibranium metal, it is nothing. Kyle, can I go into the city and take a look? This is the real world. I want to go in and see it for myself." Howard was so excited that he couldn't speak clearly, and he looked at Kyle eagerly. It was the first time he was so excited and lost his composure. For scientists, the technological city of Wakanda is like a lifelong believer seeing God and wanting to worship him crazily. Of course, but you should change your clothes in advance. Otherwise, you will be attacked by local residents as soon as you enter. Kyle nodded. He brought Howard here to explore, partly because he wanted to help Howard break the shackles of the old technological concepts of the outside world. "Okay, I'll wear whatever you tell me to wear." Howard agreed quickly. Kyle smiled mysteriously. "You said so." 5 minutes later, in the hidden city of Wakanda, inside the bustling modern streets, using the simple magic of venom, Kyle disguised himself as a tall and strong indigenous youth with dark skin and wearing a white robe. He blended in with the local indigenous people without any sense of disobedience. "Kyle, is this really okay for me to wear?" Following Kyle closely, the short Howard spoke in a low voice. At this time, he was wearing a ferocious beast-shaped mask that covered his face, and his thin upper body was covered with black and white powder, making it impossible to tell what color his skin was originally. He was also wearing a strange and primitive wooden staff and headdress. "Look, they are dressed similarly," Kyle whispered to comfort her. "This is really advanced and barbaric. The cities and objects created are so advanced, but the customs and aesthetics are so primitive and outdated." Howard complained about his own dress, but was soon attracted by the advanced technology within the city and couldn't take his eyes off it. Just then, a suspended train passed over their heads, on a bridge several dozen meters high between tall buildings, passing silently like a stream of light. Howard looked up, his eyes flashing through the gap in his mask, and he suppressed his excitement and whispered to Kyle, "Incredible! They have created a suspended train across centuries, without any noise, and can reach a very high and stable speed." Kyle smiled and said bluntly, "Because of the special material." Material? Howard didn't understand and fell into deep thought. Kyle reminded him, "Have you forgotten the shield you gave to Steve at the training base?" "Of course I haven't forgotten," Howard said, and suddenly trembled all over. He looked at Kyle in disbelief and said with difficulty, "You mean their light rail train is made of vibranium?" Vibranium metal, also known as sound-absorbing steel. It is the hardest thing on Earth, and is the most valuable rare metal known to mankind. He once thought that the shield provided to Captain America was the only vibranium material on Earth. Later, when he saw Kyle holding a vibranium arm guard, he was shocked and repeatedly asked about its origin. And now, Wakanda uses vibranium metal to develop a hover train? Facing Howard's doubts, Kyle answered softly, "It's not just the suspension train. They use the vibranium minerals that have been mined for thousands of years to make clothes and weapons, to provide energy for the city, and to enhance the level of technology. You can say that this city was originally created based on vibranium. The answer was so shocking that Howard almost cried out in surprise. Fortunately, he realized in time that he was surrounded by indigenous people, and the words he was holding back were stuck in his throat. After a long while, he said with deep emotion, "We are all on the same planet. Why are there such big differences between regions?" Even Howard, a self-made multimillionaire, is jealous. It is no wonder that for so many years, Wakanda has guarded the vibranium mines and dared not publicize them to the outside world, living an independent life in seclusion, and expel or even kill outsiders. This is a mountain of vibranium, or no matter what, this city is the crystallization of advanced science. Most of the correct and practical scientific and technological principles can help me avoid 50 years of detours. Howard's eyes lit up. When he understood this, he realized the deep meaning of why Kyle brought him here. Kyle suffers from a genetic disease. Before leaving Earth, he has to pave the way for them to the right path of future technology and evolution. For the next period of time, Howard was completely immersed in the city of the future, looking forward to seeing all kinds of novel technological products. Kyle was quietly attracted by another phenomenon in Wakanda City from time to time. Groups of people from different indigenous tribes, dressed in the same strange indigenous clothes, would march towards a certain part of the city. The local residents seemed to be celebrating something collectively, talking excitedly with smiles on their faces. Kyle mixed in with the crowd of passersby and listened for a while. Soon he showed a look of realization and understood what was going on. It's not a local festival or anything, but today just happens that the king of Wakanda is declining in age, and Prince Chaka will accept the challenge of the royal families of various tribes in the country. If he succeeds, he will be promoted to the new king. Interesting. Howard, let's go and take a look. Kyle suggested, turning back, and was stunned for a moment. He didn't know when Howard ran away from the area beside him. He looked around and saw a large number of indigenous people rushing to the challenge site to watch, and it was difficult to see Howard. That old gentleman was so fascinated that he actually dared to leave my side. Kyle's face changed slightly. Wakanda has always viewed outsiders with disgust and hatred. Given their brutal methods, if Howard revealed his true identity, the consequences would be disastrous. Kyle didn't think too much about it. He immediately moved forward along the path of the many indigenous residents, searching among the dense crowd. Chapter 139, Identity Exposed. Wakanda, the southeastern end of the city of the future. Huge amounts of rivers were cut off here, and the cliffs were like countless jagged rock steps, with waterfalls cascading down and water vapor rising. In the upper part of the cliff, the rock drop was not big enough. So the indigenous royal family members of each tribe gathered together and stood in one place, lining up downwards until they reached the flat and wide platform protruding from the middle of the cliff. The stage is the size of a basketball court. This is the battlefield for the royal challenge ceremony. The king's guardian holding a vibranium spear and the ritual elders wearing strange costumes are on the edge of the stage. In the center of the platform, a young man with a dark and strong upper body naked, holding a vibranium shield and a vibranium sword, with a faint luster of wisdom in his eyes, young but still majestic like a king, standing proudly and tall on the edge of the cliff of the platform. On the cliff area of the waterfall, only the royal families of the major tribes of Wakanda were qualified to stand, while the rest of the citizens crowded outside the cliff. The chief elder of the ceremony, holding a vibranium spear staff, stepped onto the stage with flowing water and said loudly, "I, Bach, would like to introduce Prince Chaka to everyone." Prince Chaka majestically raised his shield and sword, then knelt on one knee on the platform with flowing water, causing enthusiastic cheers from the royal families and people of various tribes. In the ritual battle, only surrender and death represent one party's withdrawal. If there is a warrior from the royal family of the tribe who wants to challenge Prince Chaka to obtain the noble and powerful name of Black Panther, the chief elder of the ceremony cleared his throat and spread his hands. "I will show him the way to the throne." At this time, Kyle followed the crowd to find Howard. When he arrived at the edge of the waterfall cliff, he happened to see the beginning of the royal challenge ceremony not far below. After the chief elder of the ceremony finished asking the question, Chaka looked ahead with dignity, and representatives of the royal families of various tribes began to respond one after another. The merchant tribe will not participate in the challenge for the throne. The mountain mining tribe will not participate in the challenge for the throne. The river tribe does not participate in the throne challenge. Kyle, who was standing outside the cliff, couldn't help but shrugged in boredom when he saw the scene below. Although this is a local indigenous custom, it is equivalent to a process form, which shows that the royal families of various tribes have no objection and allows the prince to inherit the throne legitimately. However, in his opinion, this is the other side of Wakanda's advanced hardware. The excessive barbarity and backwardness of its software culture is more like vulgarity. This city of the future is far more developed and advanced than any other place in the world, but it still has a throne challenge ceremony with fighting in a ring and the strong being respected, which really reflects the barbaric heritage to the fullest. Let's find Howard as soon as possible. Kyle shook his head slightly and prepared to leave here, just as the chief elder of the ceremony raised his voice and asked the last tribe, "Are there any people of royal blood who want to challenge Prince Chaka for the throne?" Finally, in the cliff cave, the representative of the royal family of the Jabari tribe appeared at the entrance of the cave and said slowly, "Today, the Jabari tribe, don't come over here." The next moment, a cry of surprise suddenly came from the cave, and then from behind the royal representative of the Jabari tribe, a slightly shorter member of the tribe rushed out in panic. Tap tap. The short Jabari people waded into the stage of the challenge ceremony, and the festive scene suddenly became quiet, with only the sound of the waterfall being heard. In the entire waterfall cliff area, countless natives had solemn and tense faces, their mouths wide open, and their surprised eyes all fell on the Jabari man. There are actually people who want to challenge the throne. Countless members of the royal family of the tribe were in doubt and confusion. Even the representative of the royal family of the Jabari tribe twitched his lips slightly. Who is this member of the tribe? You know, as a warrior, Chaka is resolute, strong, and decisive. As a prince, he is kind, wise, and responsible. If there were no doubts about his kingship, no one would have the audacity to challenge the throne during such a major ceremony. In fact, at this moment, in addition to the confused local residents, there were two other people who were also stunned. One was a Jabari man on the stage. He looked around in confusion, not knowing whether to advance or retreat under the strange gazes of many indigenous people. The other was Kyle, who was standing on the edge of the cliff. When he saw the familiar figure coming out of the cave and walking onto the stage for the challenge ceremony, he felt a headache. Under the waterfall, above the platform. "Warrior, are you sure you want to challenge the throne?" the chief ceremonial elder asked in a deep voice. Before the Jabari could finish his words, Chaka stared at him with sparkling eyes and threw the vibranium sword in his hand calmly. "I accept your challenge." The Jabari subconsciously reached out to catch the vibranium sword, but although vibranium metal was not heavy, it contained some steel. Adding to the force of Chaka's throwing, he couldn't bear it and held the vibranium sword in his arms. He took a few steps back and fell into the water to relieve the force. Chaka, the tribesmen watching were talking with strange faces, wondering when did the Jabari tribe, who hid in the remote mountains, become so weak? But then, something happened that shocked everyone even more. The Jabari fell into the water. When he stood up again, with the vibranium sword in his hand, the camouflage dust on his upper body had been washed away, revealing his original fair skin. "That man is not from our Jabari tribe." The representative of the Jabari royal family stared at him and asked angrily, "Who are you?" "I told you guys you got the wrong guy." The Jabari sighed helplessly and quickly took off his beast mask, revealing a European and American gentleman's face. His mustache trembled as he said, "Sorry, I went to the wrong place. It's actually an outsider." The surrounding tribal royal families and even the indigenous residents outside the cliff were in an uproar. Such a major throne challenge ceremony. How could an outsider sneak in? Damn it! He destroyed the sacred ceremony. Kill him! Amidst the passionate and angry shouts, the fastest to take action were the king's female guards at the edge of the stage. They struck the cliff with the butt ends of their vibranium spears, making a crisp yet dull and oppressive sound. Any outsider who enters the ritual area that only the royal family is qualified to enter will be killed on the spot. Among them, the female guard captain, wearing a vibranium red combat suit, raised a vibranium spear and threw it at Howard with all her strength with indifference. Wait! Chaka tried to stop him, but it was too late. He had not yet taken the heart-shaped grass to achieve the extraordinary physique of Black Panther. He could only watch as the spear whizzed past and rushed straight towards Howard's chest at twice the speed of sound. Even at a distance of 100 meters, a car would be pierced through and nailed into the concrete by the captain of the escort's vibranium spear. Moreover, it was only less than 10 meters away. At this moment, a dark figure flew across the waterfall and rushed into the waterfall at a very fast speed, approaching Howard at the same speed as the spear. Chapter 140, another Kai blow. Howard stood there in a daze. The vibranium spear was thrown too fast, like a stream of light, and it was close to him in the blink of an eye. An ordinary person's eyes and brain could barely react, but the body could hardly react and dodge. A cry of surprise came from the Wakanda royal family and the indigenous residents. It was a young indigenous man who jumped off the cliff. A breaking energy tide erupted under his feet, and he turned into an afterimage and flew down the ceremony stage. His speed was actually faster than that of the high-speed spear. Just as the vibranium spear was about to pierce Howard, at the critical moment, the indigenous youth arrived first, and his right hand, wearing a dark metal arm guard, stretched out like lightning and suddenly grabbed the middle of the vibranium spear. "Stop!" the indigenous youth growled, grabbing the fast-moving
No more novels? Take part in the voting. The most requested novels and those with the most likes will be chosen for publication on euroaudiobooks.com. There, I can upload as much as I want without the risk of receiving a strike. Our 18 novels and other content that exceed what is morally acceptable are only published on Patreon or the free novels page. Remember, the site is funded by donations on Ko-fi and Patreon memberships.